All right, everyone, welcome to DIGA615. We are back in week 2 here. This is our real-time face-to-face session. We're recording this for everybody at home, joining us either later or for the folks that can't join us here this evening live. So we have a good, fortunately, a good group or good, I guess, number of our regular class here with us here this evening, so that's good. So before we get started, with our content, we're visiting just prior about how unique this course will be, kind of taking it from a traditional lab environment where tonight, actually, about right now at this time, we would be outside stumbling through the snow, typically collecting some field data. So the good news about that is we'll be able to spend a little bit more time discussing tonight what a lab might look like for you all individually. But nevertheless, we'll be working with different options and availabilities for labs week to week for us all, since we won't be able to necessarily get together here to do a group data collection effort. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to share my screen out here with folks, and we're in week 2 inside of DIGA615. This is in our current LMS of Canvas here, so that many of you may have seen this loaded up here as of recent. Maybe last night, I think I had some of this going, and I did spend quite a bit of time last week into this week working on some of our ArcGIS Pro, the migration from desktop into Pro for this lab, and there have been some roadblocks a little bit there that still to this day I can't quite figure out here, but we'll do the best with what we can, and it's not going to hinder or derail us in our lab, so that's the good news. But before we get started, just wanted to mention, in case I do forget, that you can use either desktop or Pro for this lab. Both will work fine, and we'll want to step you through that process here this evening. So with that being said, and in terms of the overview of week 2, you could follow along with me or certainly pull this information up on your own computer. If you have dual monitors, that's great. You may want to pull up your Canvas session on one page and then our technical side on the other. And if you do only have one screen, no problem. We'll step you through things when we get to that stage piece by piece. But you'll notice that there's an agenda out here for week 2. And in general, the overview for our period here tonight will be to step you through, at least conceptually here tonight, what does this lab look like for week 2? We have kind of a pace and compass mapping lab and a tape and compass mapping lab, but we'll talk about that here in a bit. And so this is really designed to help you learn the basics of data, how it's created, angles, distances, direction, azimuth, bearing. They seem kind of like elementary topics, and they might be for you, but nevertheless, all data has to start from a point of origin, and it's created, maybe it's through GPS, maybe it's through digitizing, but nevertheless, all the lines that we make, they all have a direction, they all have a place, and how can we better understand that? So the fun part of this is the content itself is not super complicated when we get down to it. It's an angle. It's a distance. We know what 45 degrees is, and not from a trig perspective, but from a standpoint of just understanding a basic compass. Here's north. I turn to the side, 90 degrees, I'm looking east. Little things like that, not super difficult. Where we tend to get into a little bit more of the brush, and where I call it, we talked earlier about the creative failure opportunities in this course, is a good thing, because it gives us that experiential learning that can help set us up to realize, this approach didn't work for me, but now I know why. So we can't understand that unless it happens to us. So what better way to do that than to go out and collect our own data and figure out where things went wrong? That's the whole design of this course. Is figure out where things went wrong and learn from our, I don't want to use the word failure because it's in the sense of learning, but when we stumble on something, that's how we can learn. So nevertheless, we're going to learn about our sources of error and think about how error can be introduced into our data sets when we're collecting them, or at least be able to also identify them from potentially another source. A source gives us data. We might now have a better understanding of where some of those sources of error could be introduced into that data. So that's where we are at. Let's go ahead and take a look at our agenda for the night. And this is not set in stone. We can kind of work on things as we want to here, and whether or not we go till 10, that doesn't matter. We'll see kind of where people are at. Truth be told, people's saturation level usually reaches its peak after about 2.5 to 3 hours. So I get that. We'll see where we're at. I think a lot of the videos and things like that you could watch if you do want to adjourn later. It's up to you. More on that though as we get going. But I did want to spend a little bit of time doing some basic recap from week 1. We had some questions, comments on that a little bit earlier here before we started. It was fun fodder for discussion. And then I'd like to take us through really what the lab looks like and what are some of the options available for us to do and how can we set all this stuff up. And then I'd like to step you through a demo, just a basic demonstration using Pro. As noted, Pro gave us some challenges with being able to complete the lab that we typically do it, but not a whole lot. Maybe we're losing maybe only 5%, of some of the findings from that. But and I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I just can't figure out quite where to go with that. But I'll demo this through you and I'll demo out the lab experience, what this is like, following our little GIS guides tonight here with you. It's part of number 3. And then maybe talk about some sample questions or ideas that you might have if you're interested in carrying out this lab as an option for your work this week. And then we'll wrap up with just a general discussion of IoT and start to think about error sources. These are not super complicated things here. It just more or less I want you to start to get your mind going on where can data be introduced, how can we minimize or how can we suppress those sources of error too. So anyway, you'll also see a breakdown of the assignment activity and some of the options here in the agenda. Likewise, you can find this information posted out on Canvas as well. In particular, if we come back over here to our modules in week 2, you'll see that right here under the assignments and activities. You'll see the assignment here, just what we're looking at in the agenda breakdown. So you'll see all of this material right here in your activity. And then of course, some of the options. If you want to collect your own data, here's what you would need to do for that, for option 1 for this lab. Because typically we all get together as a class and form groups and go and collect the data. But if you wanted to use your own data collection activities, we'll step you through option 1 here. And then also, if you are interested in maybe you're not interested in option 1, then we can have you come back and take a look at option 2, which is simply to use some of last year's data. And so I have data from last year posted here for you, some photos, things like that to take you through that scene. So it helps give you some better appreciation of that area. And then what else would you need to do for option 2, which is a lot more simplistic. So, but I would encourage you, if possible, to consider option 1, because that's when you get a chance to go collect your data. You'll be able to spot errors in your data better than anyone because it's data you've collected. Nevertheless, those are the 2 options in case you may not have a compass or a smartphone or something like that available to conduct or complete that lab. Okay, so to begin, I'd like to have a brief discussion and going through some of our content from week 1 here. So I'm going to, let's see here, stop sharing for a minute so we can visit about some of our goodies from last week. I also want to see if I can I'm just going to pause the recording here, try to get my doc cam up here. All right, we're back recording here, everyone. I also did want to briefly pull up here before we go any further, just where we're at here, so people can kind of put a pulse on this. Did want to highlight a few things, which I typically like to do at the start of every class period, is just a refresher of where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going. And as noted, I want to spend just a few moments going through just questions, comments, some scenarios. I know a number of people had some pretty interesting scenarios develop that they sort of turned a light bulb on in their mind from last week's material, and step you through, some of the little activity that we had with the PLSS document, and had a person or two even venture out to some of those sites, which was above and beyond the call of duty. So great work on that. And so we'll do a little recap on some of that material, 15, 20 minutes, maybe half hour, and then move into our content here for this evening. But know that in week 3 and 4, week 3, we're going to be moving into kind of an introduction of GPS. GPS is going to be an ongoing component of our course now, especially now with data collection being a little bit more remote in the class period that we have here. But we'll be featuring some cool sessions for you coming up, working with drones and hopefully some live discussion, maybe like with 3D point cloud scanners and some of the latest cool technologies that are out there of some people in the industry who hopefully are going to be coming in maybe week 6 or 7, probably week 7, to talk about some of those things. But we'll have some sample drone projects and whatnot here for you too. So nevertheless, where I'm going with that is GPS is something to start to dig into early. It's just the introduction in week 3 to that material, but nothing really heavy hitting. Week 4, we will be, that's that Saturday period. We'll be back face to face for that. And it was originally slated obviously as a Saturday, recall back from last week's announcement. But if people would rather meet, during the week or something else besides that Saturday, that's no problem. Like, we're not going to meet the whole period or anything like that. And truthfully, I don't know that we'd really need to meet much more than an hour that day, because we're not going to be able to use our total station. That period there in week 4 was about conducting a topographic field map. So in other words, translation, you're going to make your own little miniature DEMs or digital elevation models off of survey data. So we're going to create a contour map of the ground surface and show you how to analyze that, make it, and then analyze it for future labs. So this has been always a lab where all of us use the same data because we only have one piece of equipment. So it's going to be difficult for us to, we're not going to have a full day needed for that. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is giving you the data from our class period, either last year, the year before, or whatever, and then step you through the lab, actually working on that with you and talking about some things that we may want to be aware of. So that's really the only drawback in this course, is that week 4, because we really only have one piece of equipment and it's super precise, and despite having GPS and whatnot on our phone, it's going to be really difficult to mimic that level of precision for our elevation, even be better than LiDAR at our local level, just because we're measuring things, like that. So it's pretty basic. Let's see here. Jerry had a question there. Thanks, Jerry. Saturday, that was, kind of what I was, I guess, asking, for that week 4, be our Saturday period, 11 to 4 p.m. And we don't need to meet on that Saturday, either. We just need to try to get a consensus on what we may want to do. But we might meet on that Saturday for an hour, because we're not going to be doing actual group data collection. I'll be providing everybody that data from last year and then demoing it out with you. So I guess general thoughts on that now that people might have, we could start at 11, we could start at 10, we could do something at 5, the time doesn't really matter to me, but if you have it carved out in your schedule and you want to keep it at 11 and just whoever can come in at 11, we'll meet for what we can and record it out. And then,
as far as myself goes, I'm extremely flexible. I already have the day kind of penciled in as
okay.
So.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Other thoughts or ideas? This was a really hard-hitting, time-intensive lab, and that's why it was on Saturday. Part of the reason it was on a Saturday and not in a traditional week is our classes started at 5, and we couldn't get the lab done. Starting to get, it'd get dark basically. So nighttime was our limitation. That's why it's on that Saturday. So the good news is this year we won't be, if it is good, we won't be having to go collect all that data. We can use a past class, but the drawbacks are we're not getting our hands on the field gear. But in that Saturday period, I wanted to talk about what that is and how things work. And, there's videos and things like that out there to show you, to replicate how it works. Just our process was the strategy behind it. And that's what I was going to talk with you about on that Saturday. So other thoughts or anything like that? Are people okay in just keeping it at 11?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, this is Steve. Yeah, I'm 9 a.m. I'm fine with it.
Fine, okay, thanks, Steve. Jerry, any other thoughts on that?
Good with me.
Alex, okay?
11 is fine.
11 is fine, okay. Per?
I would prefer to move it up in the week if no one else is opposed, but I could still make Saturday work as well. You know, if daylight was the only consideration for the Saturday. But I still have the Saturday booked off from seeing the schedule there, so I can go either way. Seems like we had a consensus for Saturday, so I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, and sometimes people plan for that, you know, in advance,
Yeah.
you know, there. And I guess, you know, what we can do is, for the time being, my sense is, unless there's an overwhelming email response or something, or a call out in class, is to maybe keep it at 11. But for folks like Per, if that doesn't work for you, what we can do is record that session, and you'll be able to pick it up, because there is not going to be any to take that piece of gear, and it just we have one piece of gear, and so we can't really replicate that other than to show people how it works. But then what did we do with it, and why did we do what we did with it out in the field? So I want to talk about those strategies of data acquisition, basically. Of, you know, it's in order to collect data, we need to have a plan, and not to have a plan will show in our results, you know, because our data is not going to look like when we get up, we're out in the field, and we're like, gosh, now I'm looking at the data I just made. This data doesn't look anything like it was when we were out there collecting it. What happened? It was the sampling strategy. It was the design to collect the data that was poor, you know. I'm just saying, like, that's what we're learning about in there, is like, how do we design a strategy to best mimic the reality and the expectation of the data that we're trying to acquire. So I don't think anybody would be at a super major loss if you couldn't attend that Saturday session, I guess, you know, for Per and others that Saturday doesn't work.
John, I got a question.
Let's see here. Let's
Shay.
see. Oh, Shay. Yep. Go ahead.
Is there any benefit to having access to your own total station for that activity, or does that just create more confusion and problems?
No, I mean, yeah, if you had one, you could certainly go do your own study. You know, I mean, it's the principles are the same. It's just, you know, whether you had a solo station or you had one, you know, kind of like the traditional, like 2-person one.
Yeah, we got both. We just got a robo station too.
Oh, so that'd work.
So
Yeah,
I
I mean,
could do a one-man kind of thing.
I'm curious. It's not like I'm about to run out and buy one or anything. I'm just really curious. How much? What's the price point on this equipment typically?
You know, the one the school has isn't overly expensive anymore. I think at the time it was maybe like 15 grand. You know, now it might be. Oh man, I'd have to look it up. Couple grand maybe. My guess is. You know, we did have a data logger that got boosted. Somebody stole that. I don't know, not necessarily from our program or anything at the time, but this was a long time ago. So, I mean, they do have some value. And I do know that like some counties and things like that on occasion have, like, they'll sell theirs, you know, sell out their older equipment. But Shay, you know, I know you use them a lot. You know, what do you have ideas on, like, the maybe what the value is on some of the stuff you're using for Jerry's inquiry?
Not in front of me, but I mean, we did acquire ours from, I believe it was Minnesota DOT sale. So it's older equipment that they sold off, like you were saying there. So I could get some numbers for you if you'd like. I don't have them in front of me.
Sure, yeah. So Jerry, I think comfortably, if you had just an older piece of equipment, which is totally fine for this lab, you know, we don't need, you know, $50,000 equipment, but it might honestly be, you know, I'd say a couple grand as a ballpark.
I'm not sure my student loans will cover that.
No, I can understand. And, you know, it might be possible to, I guess I don't really know on this, but if someone did want to take out the total station locally here, you know, maybe I could arrange that, you know, if somebody wanted to do that for a project. But I think more often than not, people are doing some type of combo activities from apps on their phone, and, you know, running some really cool projects on that and doing some little comparative studies. But total station is nice because we're really getting into the precision level of elevation mapping, like our Z values of our data. And so like in advanced GIS, when we had, many of you were in that course, when we're working with, elevations and slope and things like that off of points at elevation data, that's really what we're doing with that period in week 4. And so it's, kind of stinks that we can't all get together for that. I get that. That's really the only tricky lab. So we'll replicate it the best that we can. Rest assured, you're going to get a chance to work with the data, and you're going to get a chance to see the terrain that we were mapping, that where the data comes from. So we'll be able to talk through that and talk about those sampling strategies. And I'll try to employ with you. Actually, I do have a video on how to use that total station too that I put together last year, so that you'll be able to figure out how to use it, what goes on behind the scenes, just that we won't be collecting the data together. But Shay, yeah, if you want to trailblaze and do your own lab, that's fine too for that.
Yeah, I might consider that. Thanks.
You bet. And that goes for anybody, too. Good questions there, folks. So consensus is we'll leave it at 11, as I'm understanding maybe people there. And Ian, welcome too. Just say hop on there. Well, I didn't see hop on. I just see your name pop.
Hello.
Well, yeah, good to see you, Ian. So we'll keep it at 11 on Saturday and do the best we can with that. So very good. So that's what is coming for us moving forward in weeks 3 and 4.
Wait, John,
Yep.
can you, I know you'll go into this more detail later. Can you just give us a quick preview of the final project, so at least we can be thinking of something in the back of our heads?
Absolutely. Yep. Here, give me a second here. So here, can you all see my screen? Yep. Okay. Thank you. Here's some samples. I have this in week 4, but there's no harm in talking about it now here either. And well, this was an old version, so we won't look at this too closely, but it looks similar to this. But the idea for the final project in this course would be to think about a data acquisition project. Now, this could range from anything IoT related to sentiment analysis that we'll be getting into later in the course, like looking at geotag, let's say tweets and stuff on Instagram, where you can conduct a real-time sentiment analysis. The analytics behind that is a little bit, I'll say rough, because we don't have a lot of actual data to make really hardcore good inferences, but nevertheless, you could see how sentiment analysis works. Like here's an example. I'll talk about it later, but who's in the Super Bowl? Tom Brady, the Bucks, and who else was in the? I can't remember here.
Chiefs.
Ravens or
No,
Chiefs.
the
oh
Kansas
yeah, the
City.
Chiefs. Yeah, Chiefs and the Buccaneers. I have too much data acquisition on my mind here. Can't remember that. But here's a great example of sentiment analysis. If people were making out tweets like, "Man, I hope Tom Brady goes down," or "Man, Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs, they're the greatest team ever." So there are certain key words in there that evoke sentiment, like great, or a feeling of goodness, or whatever it is, or Tom Brady's going down, negative. So it's kind of like a negative tweet. So if you have like that sentiment attached to those tweets are being generated from somewhere. So if you have a large enough volume of that geotag information, you could sort of see, well, what states are cheering for what team, or what counties, or what cities, or so. It sounds really glamorous, and it is really cool if you can get the data. So we're going to work through some of those activities in class, and there it is. So good, Jerry, you can lead that discussion when we get in there. But it is cool. It's cool stuff. So like that's an example you could do for a final project. It may be crude, but who cares? It's about collecting data. We have IoT content. Like I have just put up some security surveillance systems, and I can program that stuff to acquire different features, everything from people to rabbits to deer, whatever it is. and I could do a study on, frequencies of movement around, the property or whatever. And so, trail cameras, I know some people did some cool work with trail cameras and animal movement and things like that. That's another application you could do with this. So those are just ideas of kind of beyond. But then, of course, we have our compasses that you could use and compare it to another data acquisition source. You could run maybe 2 compass apps on your phone. I'm just making this up. And maybe one is touted to be more accurate than the other. Could you design a test to replicate that? Some people have downloaded some spatial apps for like walking or biking and did a time analysis on what it takes to go from point A to point B with different apps, and actually physically timing how long it took to ride that route, and then checking it out with what the app said. So there's a lot of cool things. People have taken, I mentioned the total station, and they surveyed. It was raining on a day that one person had the gear a couple of years back, and he wanted to survey his basement floor because he thought it was uneven. So he surveyed out his basement floor to find out where the area was not level, and created basically a contour map of a room in his basement. So other people have done they surveyed a football field because they had believed that they were, you hear of all the teams running uphill both ways, to check how level the football field was, at a high school field or whatever. People have done some baseball diamonds locally. You're not going to be able to go into a major league diamond or something and do that, but other times people have done some pretty cool studies, like with the river, taking a sonar out in a GPS unit, and you're basically creating a bathymetry map of the river. So people have done some spatial models with that, just collecting data and talking about how it works and what happened in that process. And been kind of all across the board with that. But in general, think of something that you want to collect, define a study area, and then utilize a couple of technologies or one technology, and kind of talk about how it worked, how it was built in with your workflow. So you're coming up with a purpose and then making a design, and that design should try to embody a particular technology that is best suited for that goal. And don't worry, none of these are going to be perfect, but that's the idea, is we want you to have that creative failure opportunity to learn. So here are some examples. This one, I have some from last year, actually. I wasn't prepared there, Steve, to pull those up here right now, but I'll get those and we can look at them. So this one happened to be a total station that a couple guys back in the day went out and they surveyed Minnehaha Park up in the city. So they wanted to turn this piece of land into like a little DEM. That would be like our week 4 activity. And so they went through here, and this is from quite a while ago, so I think LiDAR was pretty sparse back then even. So anyway, I just want to show you what they did. They set up a survey to capture what that area looked like topographically, and then they mapped it and recorded elevations and some benchmarks there and whatnot. And then they kind of just showed the study area that they had tied into. And then these blue lines were their elevation shots. And this is what we would have been doing on Saturday. So imagine taking 60 readings. That's why we have it during the day, because it would just take so long, in an old traditional unit like that. But then they used some trig functions that we talk about in class as well to determine the height of Minnehaha. The height of the falls here, they wanted to see if they could use some trig to do that. So you don't really need a total station to even, determine the height of an object or something like that. I mean, if you had a laser rangefinder, or access to some other cool, like maybe drones or work or something, you could do a lot of cool mapping or thermal imaging or whatever if you had access to that stuff. But like a laser rangefinder with like a built-in height detection. I mean, you could do stuff like that, but they set up their total station they took a distance reading to the height of the falls. I think they set up right here. Then they took a distance reading to the bottom of the falls. Then they just took the vertical angle, to the top of the falls, and then they recorded that angle, and then using basic trig functions, determined the opposite side of that triangle, essentially. And then they calculated, well, on the website, it said 53 feet, and they came up with 56.7, and so then they had, this kind of shows a graphic of what they did. Like they set up here, took a reading, horizontal distance, and then just recorded the angle up, and then did some trig to determine the height. There's George hanging out in there too. So those are some samples, and actually I have another one here. I think this one was an older project as well. I'll have to get some newer ones in here for you all, but here's another one where a group was looking at stream incision. And so they had their study area going on over here. And in this case was another total station application. And so they took several cross sections across here with their instrument, and these little green dots are their survey locations for elevation. And then they created a gradient change, like a gradient map here, an elevation change. So, like what might happen with stream incision and overall stream profile. Now, you could definitely try this. Like in one of our labs, what we're going to do later on, as I'm going to have you fire up your phones, if you have a smartphone, and we're going to run not only Arc Collector, but we're going to run some other GPS apps and things like that too, possibly. But we're going to test out just how accurate our Z is in our phones, and not to ruin the suspense, but it's not very good. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a map like this, like an elevation map with our phones, with our phone GPS, and it's going to look terrible. But we're going to compare it to LiDAR data for the same area so that you can see how erratic some of your points are. And maybe some of those points are more error prone. Maybe there's tree canopy, maybe whatever it is, but that's part of the exploration of that lab. So that's also, an idea for a potential final project is, you could do some testing like that, with your phone GPS, or I know it's coming down the line, but you could hook up some type of like a Garmin Glow or something like that enables better accuracy, for your smartphone to get more reliable elevation data, and actually, create some maps like this with like a Garmin Glow or a peripheral add-on that's going to enhance your accuracy, perhaps. Just out of curiosity, does anyone in class right now I'm just going to stop sharing here for a minute. Does anyone have the iPhone 12? Jerry?
Yes.
The mini, not the full size, the mini.
Mini, that's okay.
Yeah, I got the mini as well.
I got it.
Oh yeah, pair here.
Pair, you have iPhone 12?
I think this one.
Okay.
The double.
Does anyone, and the only reason I'm asking is this, because you guys make me jealous. Take a look at this bad boy. This thing's an iPhone 6 Plus.
The only reason why I went ahead and went to the iPhone 12 is because I could get the mini. Otherwise, I was perfectly happy with my 7, but the mini is a nice size, and that the bigger phones just irritate me. That's the only reason I went to the 12 is because of the mini.
No, and that's great. And I appreciate the I guess just kind of seeing what people might have or not at this point, because where I'm going with that is I'm looking at upgrading my phone here too, just because it's it's a little bit old, but I want to do some cool things for class in here as well. And so folks that do have the iPhone 12, and it might be on other phones too, like Samsung and all that stuff, if you're into that there's a built-in LiDAR scanner now on your iPhone 12. It's not like a $60,000 LiDAR scanner, but
I'm thinking that's only on the Pro model.
Okay, maybe it is on the Pro. I was looking at the Pro Max, and the only thing holding me up is the price. But hey, but anyway, so if you do have like maybe a Pro or the Pro Max or something on that, or maybe there's some other phones that that you all might have that has some cooler new technology, than I might have on here. Those are great examples of building a schematic structure using your 3D point cloud scanner, on your phone. Yeah, 10 years ago when we were talking about LiDAR, there's no way in heck I would have thought, boy, they're going to put a LiDAR scanner in a cell phone, that's going to be $1,000. I mean, we're $1,000 now. I mean, that thing would have been like $80,000 10, 15 years ago, maybe. So I guess where I'm going with that is whether you have a 6 Plus like I do, or whether you have a new 12 version, there's some really cool technology enhancements to modern phones. And those are definitely fair game for a really cool final project in the course. But all we're doing is thinking spatial data collection, data acquisition. Data can come in any different type of form, because the golden rule out there that we all can drill right into our minds is that any piece of data that we have, say it again, any piece of data that we have is about something that is somewhere. So whether you're scanning something, whether you're mapping something with a drone, whether you're using a pace and compass, that data is somewhere and it has information associated with it. So I would let your creativity be your guide, but I would also let the scalability and feasibility be your guide as well. So we don't want to make them too complicated. But so that maybe gives us some ideas to get rolling on that. And but since apps came out, people are able to do some really fun and really cool projects. Just a lot of things is just, quite frankly, comparing different ways that you can collect data. Is one more accurate? What does accurate mean? So what are these apps using for data sources? What are crowdsourcing data like? And so I think later in weeks, I think it was 6, maybe week 6, I have an opportunity for you to do a little bit of app exploration for data acquisition. So that might be a good lead into a final project idea too. So just kind of begin thinking about that stuff. And really the only thing that's complicated right now is the total station to get. But I don't really even know, truthfully, if we need to do that 100%. If you want to do that for a final project, I mean, you could. But I think there's also some other cool technologies that you can get into. Very good, everyone. Thank you for the comments. Anyone else joining us that has maybe a different piece of technology or gear, like when we're talking about phones, that they may have on a different device? That's kind of cool. Anyone might have? I mean, apps are coming and going at an incredible rate. So something that we may not know about now might be ready and new in a month that that you could look at and run. So very good. Well, thank you for the questions on that, and we'll revisit all of that here again soon. Okay. All right, so coming back over to week 1. General things to chat about in there. PLSS. Let's spend a few minutes here, just kind of doing a brief recap on some of the things that we were doing there from last week. General comments or thoughts on the crazy world of PLSS, and I threw some stuff in there on legalities too. And for a few years, I was always battling attorneys, and so I learned a lot about real estate and law. For quite a while. I'm not an attorney or anything, but it was fun going to these battle contested, I would call them hearings, and some of the attorney, like one is an older guy, and I remember he was like thinking big time, and he had like this little dinky like 8.5 by 11 map and like of this property, and then I had this huge plot, man, it was like 4 by 6, and I just spread it out right over his maps. He was like, oh. It was a great thing, and how you can use visualization techniques to communicate a story in legal situations is really, really powerful. So that's why I threw that little segment in there about the legal aspect. So something real, it's something to be mindful of, but how you can use spatial mapping, spatial information to provide relevant storytelling and, quite frankly, documentation. And that's a large part of whether you're getting in common law or case law or things like that. But so one of the other things I had out there in that discussion from our week one was a number of different photos, and these may not mean a whole lot to you without context, but these basically represent a township range and section, and then what section, if this was like in the southeast quarter of, it looks, maybe there's section 31 township and range perhaps there or whatnot. But so what happens a lot with monuments, a lot of counties, at least in Wisconsin, that's where this was, are undergoing remonumentation, and it's kind of a way of verifying to make sure that these original stake marks that the government had to define property descriptions and things like that weren't moved, or something didn't happen to them, for really accuracy. And and here you can see this, see the mark of where an old stake used to be, and whether somebody hit it with a tractor or intentionally removed it, what have you. You can see that that this is a good indicator that there was something in here before that was now replaced with basically disturbed soil. And Shay, I think you probably, well, maybe not with section corners and things like that, but this kind of draws me to work that you do and looking really at disturbed soils. I mean, apart from digging up old monuments and things like that. But
Yeah, it's a classic post mold feature that we'd see in soil profiling. So yeah, that's really nice.
yeah, yep. And or anybody else, if you have examples or things like that that you want to bring in, that's great. And here was an original old government wood stake that was used as a boundary marker. But so many times, we'd see, geez, posts that were either moved or maybe they didn't have one, so they put a pile of rocks there, and then somebody bought the land, and said, well, what's this pile of rocks doing? So they move the rocks, and you lose that documentation. Or, so there's always a lot of error when it comes to property lines, and so that's why that legal section and why we're showing you, kind of stepping you through the importance of PLSS, is because it all has a rooted foothold in how properties are described. Whether we're working in register of deeds or when properties are bought, sold, et cetera, dealing with title insurance. I mean, a lot of that comes down to descriptions and inaccuracy. So at least in Wisconsin, there's been a big movement to really update all this. Everybody wants more clean information. And, when it comes down to clean information, having this documented more accurately for people, it's not costing citizens or property owners as much money to have them surveyed anymore. So you're kind of doing a favor to the public by updating all this. Things are more accurate. There's less legal issues. There's less problems and barricades or problems with legal descriptions or encroachments or whatever that might be. So that's what these photos really are showing you, are just some examples of what these old markers used to be, and how some of those things maybe looked back then 100+ years ago when they were surveying all this in. So general questions about PLSS at all? And I'd like to again take you kind of through that assignment there and go through that together.
Yeah. I was talking to a land surveyor today, and they were saying my property was plotted in 2013. And they were saying that now the center line is in the middle of the street.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have like digging up posts. I guess the newer properties we don't have, they tied it to the middle. I don't know what he was really saying. He was just giving me, they're going to come out, but they were just saying it's tied based off the county's website. It was tied to the point is in the middle of the street where they survey from.
you know, and that can be the case too. And what we're looking at in those photos were section corners
Okay,
typically. So we're talking a mile by 1 mile, you know, it's a very, very large area. But yeah, typically in subdivisions, you might have smaller posts, you know, or it might be a couple feet long. Just get pounded down into the dirt there. But so Steve, you had an interesting application. Can you share your screen out at all with us?
yeah, hold on, let me email me. Yeah, just stall for a minute, I'll email it. I know where it
Don't
is.
worry.
John, you've got a hell of an echo.
I think it's on, I just muted up Steve. I think that's where that echo is in there. So Steve, when you're ready, we'll unmute you again there, but there might be some audio reverb going on there on your computer, Steve, or whatever you're patching that through on. So yeah, thanks, Jerry. I just muted him. No offense, Steve. But so in any event, while Steve's pulling that up, does anyone have any interesting stories about any legalities or anything like that? You know, dealing with like parcels or property. In Winona, for instance, there was a long-standing feud between two neighbors. I think Feister was over 6 inches on a property boundary. One person said it was theirs, and back and forth. I mean, these guys spent like thousands and thousands of dollars arguing over 6 inches of ground. And usually if that stuff eventually goes to court, what happens is neither person gets what they want. And it's usually split down the middle. So there's never a quote winner, you know, it's just a way of dividing things up. But there's a lot of crazy cases out there. This was about a year ago where I'm at here now in the country. There was a neighbor of mine, well, he doesn't live here, but he is 600, probably 500 acres, and he's into tree farming. And but he came out and he said, well, yeah, I'm gonna log right kind of up down from your driveway there. And he said, I put some marks on the paint or painted some marks on the logs where the old fence line was there. And that's kind of where everybody agreed that it was. And at the time, you know, this property where I'm at now didn't have it surveyed quite yet. And so I was like, yeah, that's kind of, you know, it's kind of weird. I wonder if I can pull that up here. See if I can pull it up, then it will give you a better context of where that is here. Maybe I can. Oh, you're not able to see this yet, are you? Well, let's see here. Try this. Okay. Now let's try it here. Okay. So anyway, my neighbor, he owns all this over here, big into tree farming. And he said, well, I'm going to come up and log below your road. This is my road. And he said, I'll do some logging in here. And what's interesting though, there were called like old, basically pasture fences. You know, Shay, you've likely encountered a lot of these things too, or people that kind of work with surveying, and I did when I worked at the county. But there was an old convenience fence, basically, is what it was. But my neighbor over here said, well, yeah, everybody's used this line, everybody. But as a way of saying, well, I kind of know it's not right, but you know, if you're okay with it. And I said, well, no, I need to get mine surveyed here. So I ended up having a certified survey map that basically encounters all the road boundaries and things like that. But he was basically thinking that the line came up kind of through here, and in reality it was more way over here. But he just wanted a lot of these. There's some big mature oak trees in here, maybe 20, 30 of them. I was just looking to try to glom some of those oak trees off, and so I had since resurveyed that or surveyed it now completely there. But a lot of instances like that, just, you know, weird things that are going on out there where, you know, you go and surveys aren't necessarily going to change your problem always if there's something of contention. However, they can help you to begin to know what questions to ask. And I would say, Steve's pulling up some information here too. Meg, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up there. I think Meg, maybe. Oh no, I'm sorry, Meg. That was my cursor. Sorry. My bad, Meg. But, oftentimes if you had issues with maybe a neighbor or somebody thinking they own this or that, maybe I talked about this in the video. I had a friend of mine living in town, and he said, "Dad, this old lady lives next to me, and every year she moves her garden over at least a foot onto where he was renting at the time, so he didn't really care. But it's like her garden keeps getting a foot closer over to my driveway every year where he was, and so what people do sometimes is they'll move things hoping that you don't notice. I've seen it happen. They'll move things hoping people don't see it. And so when that happens, you have well, it depends what state you're in, 15 years, where you could say, hold on, this isn't cool. But if you don't say anything, then they legally could fight and acquire that property or that portion that they are claiming, and you'd be paying tax on it. So those cases are thousands and thousands out there. And it's been that way for 50 or 60, 70 years. You're probably not going to win that battle, but in which case you do like a quick claim deed and relinquish that. But it all depends what's worth it. Are you arguing over 6 inches or is it 6 acres? So that time window, if you fail to say nothing, or the sense of acquiescence where you're just like, oh yeah, I didn't know, no big deal, that can be admissible for a judge to take a look at. Did you try to stop something before it escalated? But anyway, Steve, you are going here. I'm going to mute myself so that we can try to minimize any error. But if anybody has kind of dual mics going, if you're calling in through your phone and you have your computer up, maybe move them apart or turn one of them, turn the sound down there or whatnot, then we can kind of minimize that error. Steve, go ahead. Tell us your story here.
So this is my properties to the south of my property here. So my neighbors here, they built a prayer structure, which is right off here. If you can see my cursors, there's a prayer structure here. And then we asked them when they built it last summer, well, that's fine, but extend the fence line. So they did that, and you can see you can see the fence right here that they extended, which is fine. It's in line with the existing fence. But then they built this fence, this little auxiliary fence here, and you can see how it goes from out to in. So it doesn't follow the same. It doesn't follow the fence line that's existing. And see down here where it cuts right across my lawn there. And she claims it's to keep kids out, but I'm like, it's this little itty bitty thing. If you want to keep kids out, extend it all the way to the end, but whatever. It's beside the point. But the thing is, so they just put this thing up haphazardly from in to out, and you see it cuts right across my lawn there, my property. Not by a lot, but it's a situation where if you give them an inch, they'll take a foot. So we're gonna have to have a land surveyor come out and get the exact line of the property.
One thing, Steve, too, if you had a metal detector or something like that, you might be able to go to the corners of your property, and you could probably sight that in, yourself too. Those pins shouldn't be, too terribly difficult to locate. But the other side of it is, if you had somebody just locate that line, then it would be more objective and not.
Yeah.
but I'm
This
also,
is artificial. So the grass is artificial. So there's really, you can't go, I can't go down through it. It's a big ordeal to go down through it.
this has happened when I've worked with some attorneys who were a little sly, that when they were advocating for their client, they came in and told the surveyor what to survey. So his work wasn't necessarily wrong. It was just that they communicated to the surveyor to say, we want to document this area that's in question as the survey. Then they took that and were trying to get it recorded in the Register of Deeds as a recorded survey, hoping that wouldn't notice that, and so there, from an attorney standpoint, there can be a lot of deceit as well, not from a surveyor, but if somebody said, because anybody can survey their property, and it just depends on what they're doing with that. So you could say, well, the surveyor's work is correct, but is it representing the correctness of the property? The land surveyor may not know. Well, they probably will if they pull records on it, on encroachments or gaps or inconsistencies, there. But Steve, I suspect your case there, isn't going to have a big deal, or anything like that. But
No. And these lots are all the same. I live in a cookie cutter subdivision that are popular out here in California. So every lot is uniform.
Yeah, so that'll be pretty easy one. A lot of issues that I get around the area where I'm at is, there are people buying up and splitting off tracts of land, and where somebody thought the line was property line to where the real line is. I mean, we're talking about, could be 3-4 acres. If somebody's paying, or for farming, $2,000 or $5,000 to $10,000 an acre, and sometime, in that case, that's a lot of money. So people are like, well, wait a minute here now. If I'm buying this and it's not, the property line isn't where I thought it was, then is there something to fight for? So it's a kind of an interesting thing. But other people that have issues, Steve, thank you.
I'll stop.
Yeah, no problem. Let us know how it goes. But I think that
I will.
That one should resolve pretty cleanly. Anyone else, any cool stories? Things like that you might be seeing. These legal battles are all the time happening, around me, around here in the county. And I was most recently serving on a land information committee with local county government. So that's where I get all these photos and stuff for class. But listening to the county surveyor talk about these issues and people dealing with crazy questions and problems, I mean, it's mind blowing. I wish I could remember right off the top of my head here some of those stories. But Per, did you have? So you kind of pop in there quickly, but maybe you didn't either.
Yeah, I have a dumb one. It's not a very good one, but I used to install sprinkler systems in high school, and there's this ongoing feud, classic theme of these deals, where a downhill neighbor built a retaining wall intentionally inset from their property. As a result, the uphill neighbor would have to look at a dead strip of grass because their sprinkler system only extended to the property line. Well, new neighbors moved in. They had extended stuff. So I just was part of a process where we extended all the sprinkler systems to water that lawn. And then they paid again to have them removed back when they found out that it was across the property line. And yeah, you can't make this stuff up. It's just the most stupid, super expensive for the property owner. And yeah, now they get a dead piece of grass to look at again, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, Parrot, thank you for bringing that up. And I mean, that's for some people like, oh, what's the big deal? Who cares? For a lot of people, it depends on perspective, like, I've chatted with people before about, like the one I was just telling you about when my neighbor wanted to log mine. It doesn't look like much on the graphic, but it's probably, 100 feet, 100 feet of woods. And, and I was like, well, just get the line where it is. I don't necessarily care. And so I went out there and did some initial survey, and that's how I kind of knew that he wasn't correct. But I'm not a licensed land surveyor, so, I don't have a license, like a surveyor's license or anything, so my survey wouldn't hold up, to be recorded. But somebody could say, well, 100 feet, why are you worried about that? And it's like, you have 100 feet or a couple of acres that you live on or whatever, like, who cares about, 5-10 feet? I'm like, well, what would you care about? Or whoever I was talking about, like, if somebody was encroaching 10 feet into your garden and gardening your land, oh, I wouldn't like that. It's the same thing. It's all perspective, on that. But yeah, there are just classic examples of that. My cousin, he said with heavy equipment, what they do is they move homes, but they move barns and sheds and things like that. There was a guy, Parrot, to your point, he moved it was like a big grain bin. I forget, it was like 75 grand or 80 grand to move this grain bin that this guy bought or moved or whatever, and he set it down. And it was like, yeah, it's good. So my cousin left, and this is like a big project now, like a week-long project to do this. And then another neighbor said, hey, baloney, man, like, you put that 10 feet onto my property, get it off there. This is all like big farm country. So we're talking like hundreds of acres here, not, it was literally 10 feet, my cousin told me. And he was like, I said, well, what happened? He said, well, the guy that had us move it there called us back. We spent another 75 grand to move it back over across the property line 10 feet or just off of it, so people
It's
get
not bad when you're the one being paid, but
Yeah. Oh yeah. Adam.
you were right the
they
first
came out-
time, right?
Yeah. They came out good on that, but he's like, yep, whatever. It was like, I know it was a lot of money, like 75, 80 grand, something like that. Just pick it up, move it, just for the equipment costs. The equipment is so crazy that to do all that. But they're a good example. I mean, that stuff happens. So what's the moral of the story with all of this for anybody that if you do have property or things like that? I would recommend, getting it surveyed. Know what questions to ask of your property. Watch what your neighbors are doing. Despite their good intention or their perceived good intention, you don't know. So get that stuff squared away. And it's always good to do it. Document it and know what questions to ask. But any other questions on that? You can definitely learn a lot if you get immersed into it. Shay, any cool stories?
I got nothing, sorry.
That's all right. We'll save the other excitement for later here. But okay, let's go through the assignment briefly from last week. Then we'll take a little stretch break and move into talking about the lab for this week here. So, all right, now. How'd the lab go? Was it fun in general? It's kind of like, it's not super involved, it wasn't supposed to take anybody, 3 hours to do, you could probably do it in a half hour, but with one person actually go and take a little road trip and do all this stuff and check all these sites out. So wow, in all the years of working with this, no one's ever done that. So that's pretty cool. It's a good day to get out and drive though. But how did it go overall for folks on this? But it's okay to have questions.
Nothing too terribly difficult. Everything seemed pretty
Yeah.
self-explanatory, I felt.
Yeah. Shouldn't be anything super tricky.
It definitely was helpful. I have a basic, I have really good understanding of maps, I feel, but one quirk to the PLS maps is, with the little, the barbed arrows. I'll be honest with you, I had no idea that was ever a part of it. So it was, that would have thrown me completely had I just tried to do this assignment right off the bat. But otherwise, everything seemed pretty intuitive, I felt.
Yeah, to that end, one thing, to take a look at here, let me pull that up here, Jerry, since we were visiting about that as well. So one thing to keep in mind for people when we're working with different these quote plat books, things like that, is that they may differ between states. I mean, principally they're showing the same thing, but some of the content, nomenclature, symbology may differ a little bit. And so if anybody's worked with different plats, you might see the naming conventions being different, like on roads or something like that. And just pull up the chat here. Let's see, Ian posted, here's what I found online doing so titles. Ian, you want to just talk while this is downloading here, take me through what you were doing here until I can pull that up?
It is the original land survey of that area, actually.
Okay, here we go here. So this is like an old GLO map here?
Yeah, that's the exact township that we were doing in the project.
Oh, well, that's really cool.
I was researching answers.
Ian, great work on that one. That's pretty cool. Really going in depth. No one's ever done that. Heck, I didn't even know. I used to work in this county for many years, and I truthfully don't remember even seeing this. So that's pretty neat. Seeing all these original sections, some of the section corners here with, so it looks like the bearing and some distances in there. I guess I'm not sure on that, but I have to look at this. But Ian, that's really cool. Township 21 North, Range 12 West. Well, thank you very much for sending off to look at that. When was the date on this thing? Probably in the 1850s.
Looks like it says 1848.
1848. Okay, so most of these are right around kind of that 1850 era. But yeah, this is pretty cool. But anyway, a lot of cool stories can be found in seeing the evolution of organization of data. So very neat. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, that's wonderful. Keep that up and look at that here tonight. So quite a difference from then till now. But what Jerry was speaking about here is understanding these hooks, and I think that's in the video okay there, but different plats might have different ways of conveying this in general, whether it's county roads being circles, some might have squares, some might have numbers in here, for their roads. It all depends on the state, on that. But the idea of how this is organized by way of private land ownership is what's important. But Jerry was referring to these hooks, and these hooks connect ownership. So in this case, Oakdale Ridge Farms would own not only this 80-acre parcel, but this 40-acre parcel and this 81-acre parcel. But rarely do we see these hooks jump more than one property owner. Like right here, M-Line Farms owns this parcel, but they also own this up here as well. But rarely, it will never use, I've never seen it jump more than that. Like if there was
John, I got a question.
Yep, Steve?
That M line, so that little segment down here,
Right here?
yeah, so is that a part of is the 160 incorporate that too?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I threw in an extra like 10 acres because I thought that was okay. I wasn't sure if this 160 included that.
Yep. No, and that's a good observation. One of a good key to, I guess, remember is that if we take a quarter of a section, here we're in section 3 and we have a quarter section right here. We're to divide that up into 4 40-acre parcels. That's a good indication. If you take 40, that's 80, 120, and then 160. And so a quarter section will always be 160 acres, but not always are plat data accurate. You know, there are errors in there that somebody, you know, potentially made. So, you know, they're just ongoing, or parcels change, or parcels get split. You know, so these are just kind of static, but there can be errors in there, definitely. And there are some in here. Trying to remember exactly where that, oh, like here's an error right here, just to show you that these things aren't totally right. So M-Line Farms, here we go. Here's a hook. Crosses Blank Hill Road here. What problems do you see going on here now? Who owns this parcel based on what you see with these hooks?
It's either Imlan or it's Gil and Darlene Hawk.
Right. So, you know, here's a hook of ownership, but there's one here. So this is a classic example here that plat maps can have errors in them. No question about that. So your idea to question that, Steve, is good. You know, I just kind of remember the one section here would be, or a quarter of a section would be 160, 160, 160. So the 640 acres in a section. And I'm kind of like a geek, you know, like when I'm flying in an airplane, I like to look down when I'm up there. I'm like, huh, there's a 40. Or I'm like, am I up too high? And that's really 160 acres. Is that a quarter section? Or is that a quarter section? So I love geeking out when I'm in an airplane, trying to identify land parcels from way up there, 50,000 feet or whatever we're at, but maybe not that high, but anyway. So hooks of ownership, yes, an important one on here. And this is just to get you familiar with that. If you go into county government somewhere, this is going to be a major expectation. You know, if we're working with permitting, someone mentioned that before too. I think Para, maybe you did, with permitting and knowing who owns what and where, being able to track and record that information is important. Let's go ahead and take a look at the assignment key here. What did everyone have for, let's see here. What did you have for the answer for the first one? I kind of had that up there already, but what did everybody have for this if you want to shout it out? Remember a good key. Go ahead.
The Adeline Caskey.
Yeah, and who, let's see, that was Annika, right?
Yep, that was me. Okay,
because on my screen, I just have, like, I can only see like 3 people. And so if anybody's chatting, I can't see who's below there. But Annika, yeah, that's exactly right. So a good trick for that, like we maybe talked about there, to identify a parcel is not starting here, but really starting at the end. So these are written smallest to largest. So a good way to identify a parcel is to start, let's say, in section 20. Here, so we're in section 20. And then can someone read that off to, well, here, I can't remember what section that was here. Here it was here. So the northwest quarter and then the northeast. So here we're starting in the northwest quarter. So here we are, we're starting. And now we're going into what? The northeast. So it means that we're kind of now up into here. Northeast quarter. Now what did it tell us? Can't remember.
Northwest.
Northwest, okay, thank you. And then the northwest here of this 40. So kind of imagine everything is 40. So now we're in the northwest. And that takes us right here. So very good if you had that one. Don't worry if it didn't go as planned. Re-upload your document when you're done. That's no problem. Not about penalizing here. We're about trying to figure these things out. And okay, let's take a look at the next one. Gave you the answers there, but that's okay. Okay, how many acres would this be if you were to square off this section here? And this would really, doesn't really matter, truthfully, whatever section it is, but if you were to create a quarter section, this is just a good staple. So we just looked at one with the 160 in it. Now, if you were to quarter that up again, what did you have there for that one?
40.
Let's see here. 40, who said that? Ian?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, yep, right on, Ian. Very good there. So 40 acres in there. All right. So go ahead and compare your work there. Well, we'll ask you. We'll ask everybody.
Can you pull that one back up, or the number 2? Can you show that on the?
Yeah, yep. Let's see here. I forgot what section. It doesn't matter what section it is there really, but southeast quarter of the northeast. So many things open here. I can't keep them all. So southeast of the northeast, section 14. So we'll go to the southeast and then the northeast. Oh, southeast, yeah, the northeast. So it'd be, if you were to square this off, what would that be? You know, it's just a great rule for that is a quarter section. Goes back, I think I have some pictures in the PowerPoint back in week 1 about that. Like if you were to keep quartering everything down, everything's going to either be like in 160 or then down into 40s. And so it kind of just keeps subdividing down from that. But this is, you know, that's really any of these parcels. You know, you could square off here if we're in the southwest and then the northwest up here. You know, if you were to quarter this off, you'd still, you know, it'd be half of this 80, which would be a 40. So you'd have a 40 here and a 40 there. So that goes for any. You know, here's one. Here's another good example. Here's a 40-acre quarter section. What did folks have for number 3?
I had northwest quarter of southwest quarter of section 15 T21N R12W.
So yeah, Township 19, Range 12 West. Yeah, so actually I can't remember that off the top of my head. So basically is that what you had there, Jerry? Northwest of the southwest?
Correct.
Yep, good. So folks, that's what you'd be looking for there. There at number 3, northwest of the southwest. And now number
John,
4.
I do have a question on for number 3.
Yep.
Is our answer properly northwest of or northwest quarter of?
Usually, you know, I would say what you have is fine for that. Usually I just, the way I write that as, or what you might find a description is the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter of section 2, you know, or 3 or 4 or whatever. But yeah, so my shorthand here is not complete. So this would be the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter of section 15. So yeah, please know, folks, that if you were having to write an actual legal, you wouldn't want to shorthand it like I have here. This is just my little answer key. That's, yeah, great question there. So number 4, the number of landowners who own a parcel of land in section 6. Now, this can be tricky. So this could have some variable answers in it too. So I kind of wanted to talk about that. This might have a little range for that. The number of people who own land up here in section 6. How many were you able to count up on that one?
This is Ian. I originally had 6, but then I just counted right now and I have 7.
Did 7? Okay, others? That was Ian, right? Ian?
That is correct.
Okay.
7.
I'm with Ian. I counted 6, but now that I'm looking again, I am saying the 7th.
So again, there's some goofiness going on right here. You know, here again, it's the Knowles Dairy Farm. It's crossing the road here, but now that goes to Al Glider up here. And so we're like, now what is it? Is it 6? Is it 7? Is it 8? You know, how does this all? And furthermore, you know, here's another error in here. That's why we need to be really questioning the data that we see. And my guess is here, it's just whoever was putting this plat together just got a little bit too arrow happy here. But now does Knowles Dairy Farm, do they own what Alvin Glider owns here, or what's going on? So anybody else with some answers? So it might be a range depending on what you have to find into that error. So you know, here we have 1 for sure, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, well, 7 for sure, you know, maybe, but again, then we're not sure if it's where this comes in. So you might have that range probably around 7, but you know, you could say, okay, is it maybe 8? No, 2. All right, well, let's see here. What about, so I had some good questions on this one, and usually the answer is very simple. It was like kind of what do you see on your, what is the symbol that you found there at that area? So we're looking in section 16. What did you find? Shout it
So
out.
there's a cross, which usually either means a cemetery or a church.
Yeah, yep. So it's just a simple little cross there. So that was what we were looking for there. Okay, number 6. Let's take a look at that. How many acres of land does M-Line Farms, or do M-Line Farms own in section 3? Checking the arrows.
205.08.
So, okay, those two. Say it one more time there, Ian.
205.08.
205.08. Section 3. Other people have anything different? So section 3 again, we're taking a look at the 160 here, following these lines of ownership. So not too terribly bad. But yeah, 205.8. 205, good work on that one. Okay, next, number 7. How many political townships are present on this handout?
So this is where I have a question.
Okay,
So I only see one technically on the handout, but I registered that there are 4 basically because they're just off the edges of the survey. So I said 1.
so there would always be, I guess, one platted page, you know, and that's where the kind of the key word of political townships, how they're represented on here. So we have from a local jurisdictional level, different political townships that can be present on a plat. Usually the plats are broken down with one township in mind, like that they would have one political township. This county was really, really different because at the time when these were being created, the political jurisdictional townships for budgeting and finances and things like that were kind of bordered by a river, Trempealeau River on the east, and the Mississippi on the west. So back when these political townships were developed, they were developed oftentimes by the top of a bluff. You know, like if there was a bluff going up, somebody said, well, let's just divide it right on top of the hill. And then everything on this side is going to fall in one township, political township. And then another political township could fall over the hill and you guys would be your own township. So that, I think, is how a lot of these townships, at least in this area, were originally established back in that era, not from a standpoint of, you know, taking a look at the actual platted 36 sections. So a good indicator for that, you know, you're not going to see this too often, very, you know, pretty rare. But when we get close to that river, the Mississippi here, there are a lot of, or can be 1 or 2, in this case, 4 political townships represented here. And a good way to see those is when we look right at the top up here. Here we can see part of what's called the Elma Township. And what we're seeing here is this is the southeast part of the Elma Township. And I think in the video, maybe I have this in more detail. I might have, I don't know if I have my flat book home or if that's in the office here, but where these lines are drawn, it basically, there's a line that is drawn through here. And here's part of the Elma Township where it joins up with Belvedere. So we don't see lines on here right now, but in the actual plat, there's like a little yellow line that shows the political township breakdown. So what we're seeing is the political part of the Elma Township, the southeast part of the Elma Township right here. That's what these little dividers mean. So that means the part that we're seeing right here, there's a northeast to that and then a northwest and a southwest. It just happens to be on this plat representation, on this 21 north, range 12 west. We're seeing the southeast part of the Elma Township. Now we're also seeing part over here of the Lincoln Township, which would be the southwest portion of that. So Lincoln, and this is all right on top of the bluff too. That's what makes it, like a lot of these roads follow the nice top of the bluff line. So it makes sense that that's where they, at that time, back in the day, developed or broke down their township structure. But Lincoln comes down here a ways, and then here we see where the Lincoln political township is represented. You know, there might be some slight little line differences here, but really this part of our graphic or of our 21 North Range 12 plat represents the southwest part of Lincoln. But again, there's a northwest and a northeast and a southeast Lincoln Township represented on another plat. It might be the full plat, or again, it might be a partial. So I put this one on here as a reminder that there can be instances where you may have different political townships represented on one plat, you know, a 36 section plat. And that's okay. That's going to change. It's not going to change any ownership or anything. It's just that sometimes you can have different political divisions represented on a plat. So on this particular case, the political townships, there'd be 4 on here, but there is, yes, one plat, one 36 section plat. But politically, yeah, there are technically 4 political townships on here, but no problem. Does that make sense for folks that had anything, or did anybody have 4 on there? Or something different?
I had 4.
Yeah, I had 4.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm trying to remember right off the top of my head there, but in the video, could you see the lines in there at all when I was talking about those lines in the video?
Yes.
Okay. So if folks miss that, you go back and check out the video there, and that should hopefully help clear up some things. Very good. Let's see, county roads, we're able to find 3 of those. Folks able to find 3 of those county roads?
Yes.
Yes.
I have found 2 of them.
Okay.
FN and 00 or 00 rather.
Oh, that may have been where I got, okay.
There was here was N, and then there was E up here. And then someone who said 00 or 00?
That was Jerry.
Jerry, okay, Jerry.
Yeah,
Right
E.
there.
Where's 00?
Can you, if you're able to see on my screen there?
Oh, way, that's,
Yeah.
way off to the, okay, yeah, I didn't even look over there.
Yeah, that was kind of the little sidebar down along the river down there. But these are the little puzzle pieces. You know, it's kind of cool. Let's see here. So what'd you have for PLSS? Describe PLSS. Kind of in your own words. Anyone have anything on that one?
I put in land division system began in 1785 to facilitate federal land sales west. Grid was laid out measuring 36 miles square, further subdivided 36 units, 1 mile square each, which would then be quartered further as needed.
Yeah. It's kind of that organizational system to divide private land ownership. Anyone else have anything to add on to that? Nice, Jerry. But they wish to share? You don't have to. Just an opportunity to troubleshoot and talk through this one a little bit, making sure we're all doing okay on it. Or if you have a hand up or questions, feel free to holler. Okay, let's take a look at our last one. Okay, who was the landowner of that 119.55 acre parcel in section 13 in the political township of Lincoln? Political township. So section 13, who owned that 119 acre parcel?
Randall and Barbara Averbeck.
Section 13. Zoom in on that one. Let's see, who was hollering that one out there?
Shay.
Shay, okay. So Shay was saying this parcel right here. So if everybody on my screen can kind of see that 119.55. So Shay said Randall and Barbara Averbeck. That was right, Shay?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Anyone else have an alternative solution?
That hook is kind of hidden in there.
It's weaseled in there.
Yeah,
See?
I had a old Carol Bollinger or whatever right there.
Yeah, I had that one too.
Oh, let's see, Annika. Okay. Yeah. So this one, this one is just, you could say, well, John, it was a tricky one, and it kind of was, but it's for discussion and learning, so nobody's gonna get it wrong. That's not the idea. But it's some of these details when we're trying to do, looking at mapping, we're assuming that the data is correct first off, but if somebody sent you something and they're like, well, I have Reginald Fink, or I have somebody else on here, but that doesn't make sense. The lines aren't match up. So it's the recognition is what we're after here, with this particular one here, to look for the kind of those little hooks of ownership there. And yeah, it does just slither up right through here to Barbara and Randall Auerbach there. So yeah, that's a kind of a very fine detailed one there. But again, no problem if you missed it. The idea is not to penalize people in here. We want to create and we want to explore. We can't kill creativity. We're not going to penalize people for trying to be creative and doing what they can. So yeah, Auerbach. So very good on all that, folks. So that was a good effort. So definitely, if you want to resubmit those, feel free, and we'll go through those. I'll take a look at them here, but we all should be achieving success with those. So hopefully that was a fun introduction to PLSS. And let's take a little stretch break, then we'll come back and step you through the lab, some of our options, and we'll see how that goes. Does that sound like a plan?
John, I had a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
So for number 8, for the how many county roads, so it's just the number of individual different symbols. It's not, so if you have like 4 north symbols that appear like on this one, then that only counts still as one county road.
I'm gonna share out my screen here, Alex, to make sure
That's a tricky one. I think you have to be familiar with Wisconsin county roads.
Yeah, Annika, that is right. So, a lot, like, again, states they're all gonna have different symbol systems, or a lot of them will. Wisconsin uses letters for a lot of their county roads, where I think, like Minnesota uses numbers, I think, right? For people in Minnesota. For their county roads there.
I'm not sure actually.
Okay. Anyway,
Yeah, we use
could you?
numbers.
Who's?
Oh, that was Pear. Yep, we use numbers.
Numbers? Okay, thanks, Per. So let's see, Alex, could you maybe apologize there, just restate your question again there, and then I can kind of annotate as you're talking.
So as you can see here on the map, we have 2 norths right there up in the middle of the screen almost. And I was counting those as individual county roads rather than
As one.
Just one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's incorrect, right?
Yeah. In the way that the road is laid out, the county road N in this case would be all just one road.
Okay.
I think that the reason they just have the symbols in here is to let you know that this is still County Road N. But to your point, I think what you were maybe thinking is, oh, okay, I'm just counting the, making sure I represent the symbols, making sure I count those. But yeah, and then just County Road E right here. So yeah, these would all just be one feature there.
And then just another quick question for number 7.
Yeah.
How many townships did we say there were? Did we confirm it was 3 or 4?
There'd be 4. A good
there
key
was
to
4.
that, at
Okay.
least in here, is to look up on the upper left, and that will essentially tell you. And
Okay.
most of the time, it's going to be 1.
Sounds good.
But-
Thank you.
Yeah, but in this case, it's really kind of a unique one, and that's what I wanted to show it. Yep. Very good. Okay, you want to take a little stretch break quick? And
What time back?
well, I think let's do this. It's when everybody gets back, if you want to fire up your turn on your camera, then I know that you're back, you're present, and then we'll resume. All right, welcome back, folks, from our break. We had a good community chat there, so that was always nice to see everyone and hear what's going on with you. Anyhow, let's go ahead and resume the remainder of our class here. And really what I want to do is to step you through some of the pace compass processes, the lab, kind of working through a lab demo. So this shouldn't really take us too long, I don't think, but I just want to step you through what it is that we're going to be doing for the most part. So I'm going to try here. What are you all able to see? Are you able to see currently my doc cam? Yes, okay, good, all right. So, recall back from week 1 when we were doing some of our studies in there. The whole idea with this lab is that we'll be working with,
You're cutting out there, John.
oh, I bet because I'm away from the mic here. I'll try to kind of hover over here. We're going to be working with azimuth. And recall azimuth is our 0 to 360 degrees. And let's see if I can find something to put underneath here. So for our lab, when we're working with data collection in general, we're going to be looking specifically at, taking our readings through azimuth, which is our 0 to 360 degrees. So typically, like on our compass, that's what you would have. And I'm going to pull up here. Compass app. And some of you may have this or a variation or whatever it is, but this is basically our azimuth right here. This happens to be on just our basic little compass app here, but for me is pointing this way. But nevertheless, you can see our 4 quadrants and what we have here. And so the idea with our lab is that we are going to go out and capture a basic pace and compass survey. Pace and compass survey of a small piece of ground, of a small area. And so in order to do that process, there's going to be really 3 things that we're going to use. And I'm going to come back to our drawings here in just a minute, but you want to come back over here to week 2. And where was it here? Talk about what is needed in order to make this lab happen as an option 1. And so for that, then this will kind of help tie us into what it is that you might want to do. So in order to take care of this lab with a pace and compass, the whole purpose of this is to use some basic technology. In other words, in some of the videos posted from last week, I had a simple base plate compass, a little cheapo one. I think I got those from Fleet Farm for about $3 or something. So you do not need anything expensive or anything like that. But you will need to know how to use them and how to take an azimuth reading. So that's what we're going to step you through in this lab. So either one, you're going to need a base plate compass, or you're going to need, as shown on the screen right here, some type of a compass app. And I anticipate most of you would have something that looks something in one of these 2 veins. A compass app might just come standard on a lot of phones now too, to record a Z or an azimuth. So a Z again being a direction, an angular direction to a feature. So that's the first thing that we would need for this. The other thing that we would need in order to accomplish at least one part of our lab right here is some type of a tape, or we're trying to determine your pace measurements. So You might have a bigger rollout tape, something that is a, longer tape, that kind of winds up or whatnot. Some of those might be 100-foot tapes, some might be 200-foot tapes, something like that. If you do not have one of those, no problem. Grab a tape measure, maybe one that goes out 20 feet or something like that. Or you can just mark off an area on a sidewalk, if you had something that goes like 10 feet or something. So mark off 20 feet minimum, but what I would say maybe even longer than that is ideal. So we're going to use here a compass for this lab. And then the second part would be your pace. Try not to move too far away from the computer here so I don't lose my audio with my mic here. So your pace, what we'll do with that is you'll mark off a distance. And again, if you can get it 40 feet, I just like, because it's an easy number with paces. I mean, you can use 50, you can use 30, you can use 20, it doesn't matter. But you're going to measure out a distance here of maybe 40 feet. And then you will start here. And in the videos I have posted for this week, you'll see that. That's in the lab overview video. You'll see this all transparent. I think it's like a little 3-minute video. So you're going to count the number of steps that it takes you to traverse or walk this distance all the way to 40. And when we're saying, walk this, we're not saying big, huge steps, anything like that. Because if you're out actually pacing distances and you're on a hillside and you're trying to go up the hill, you're not going to have a 3 or a 3.5 foot pace to walk up a steep hill. Your paces are going to be smaller. So when you're pacing out your distance here, take gradual steps. That's the idea with this. So what we'll do, let's say you were able to get out to 40 feet here. You'll take your 40 feet and then divide that by the number of steps it took you to walk that. That then will give you your distance per step, or your pace distance. So for me, it's right around 2.5 feet per pace. Every time, each step is about 2.5 feet for me. So I might pause and just ask, would anybody right now, would you envision any problems in determining your pace or having access to a compass, either a base plate like I have in some of the videos, or one on your phone? Anybody see any problems in setting this up? Okay, so that's a good sign. All right, so the lab itself will be to capture, as I mentioned, a small survey area, a closed traverse. So I have to make a little bit more room here. So what we'll be doing is creating a closed traverse and assessing that for error. So our goal to assess error of a closed traverse. And a closed traverse meaning if we have a starting point what we would do, I'm just drawing in some arbitrary lines here to give you an idea. Let's say this is point A, for instance. Here we might have point B, point C, and point D. And these might be different features. It could be trees, corners of sidewalks. It could be a corner of your garden. It could be a storm drain. They're just features that we're interested in recording here. What we would do is start off at our point A, and we would aim with our compass. We have the compass flat in our hand, and we're taking an angular reading to that of point B. And we are then recording this angle right here. So in azimuth, so we're recording our Z. Again, it's not elevation in this case, but rather our azimuth. Our azimuth reading, so it'll be 0 to 360 degrees. Given we know what we had up here above with our quadrants, let's say in this case, we know here that we're in the lower quadrant right here, so that we're somewhere, in here. What would our range be, or what would a potential value for this Z value be here? In other words, our angle. Would it be greater than 180 or less than 180?
Be less than 180.
Less than 180. Here's 180. 270, 90. So we know that our angle is not yet to 180, and that's fine. So these are all like little things that you should be asking yourself, when you're taking your reading is, find your north. All of our compasses are going to have a north on them. Even, if you're using your phone or whatever, they're all going to have a north on it. So when you're taking your reading, keep that in mind as you're going from, here's my north, and if I'm going 90 degrees, at least to the east here in this case, you're going to be in that quadrant. You're not going to be in excess of 90 degrees. So you want to be thinking a lot about what quadrant your features are in when you're taking these angles of measurement here, just your azimuth, your azimuth reading, your Z. So once you get to point B, you'll be at and all these features are things that you'll have to determine. You're going to have to say, here's what I'm interested in recording. And there's no right or wrong answers. It's just, pick 8. Pick 8 points or something like that, 8 or 9 points, and we'll talk more about those. Mix them up so that they're not all at perfect 90-degree angles, because that way we can assess our error a little bit, have more fun with it. But we're at point B. Now we're going to take a reading in from 0. We take a reading from 0 over here to point. It's not perfectly on there, but we'll record our angle right there. With the scratch that I have in there, are we past 90 degrees with our angle?
It looks like it's greater than 90 there.
Yeah, and it's a crude drawing, I know here, but yeah, we're just past 90. Here's our 90, here's our 180. We'll record that angle. But before we go any further though, let's back up here. So we're at our start in our closed traverse, our point A typically. So we've taken our reading to our point B. So we have our angle. So that's good. Let's just pretend here that we have A to B was, we'll call that our azimuth or our Z. We'll say that is 160 degrees. So that's what we'll write down for that, whatever our angle was to that feature. Now we'll have also our pace or our distance. This is why it's important that you have your distance recorded here as well. So your pace, you might count the number of steps that it takes you to go from A to B, and maybe it's 20 steps or something like that. And let's say your pace was at 20 steps. And let's say your pace was at I'm just making this up, 2 feet per step. What would our distance be for that from A to B, given your pace? Any guesses? $40 feet, right? Does that make sense? So you can compute your distance on the fly if you want, or just count the number of steps that it takes you to go from point to point to point, and then simply multiply that by your pace per step that we determined over here. So then you'll end up with a distance, say 40 feet, that the distance was from A to B. So what you'll then do is repeat that. Go to your point B, sight to a point C, record that angle, pace it off. And then you're at point C, you'll sight to your next point, which might be D, record your angle, record your pace, and go on until you've reached the end. We'll make another point up here called point F. And we took a reading of that. Now that we're at point F, what we will do is take your reading. You're back to our point of origin. And that's why a closed traverse is called a closed traverse, because our starting and ending points are in the same place. They'll be at the same feature. So you might be saying, well, how do I determine my features? Well, I would say pick some that you're interested in doing. A lot of times in basic traverses, people make field notes of saying, okay, there was a white oak tree or a red oak tree or whatever it is, a 2-3 foot round oak tree. And they'll make a field sketch of that. That was a feature that they are using that they know they could go back to or to reference in a, whatever it is, a graphic or what have you. So the features you choose are purely of your own creative design, for this lab. So find something that works for you. Trees are good, corners of sidewalks. It might be let's say a corner of a flower garden. It might be a bird feeder. It might be, use your creativity on that. It might be a park bench, something like that. A garbage can, fire hydrant, whatever. And so when you go into this lab, go out to your site first. First think about your site. Think about, okay, I want something manageable. This area should be, I would try to keep, and I have this in Canvas too in the assignment instructions, but keep your area small. Small, what does that mean? Well, try to keep your points, manageable. So they might be 20 to 50 feet apart, maybe one point could be 100 feet or, something like that. But, you don't have to have every feature, 100 feet away from everything. That's not the idea. The idea is to create a nice compact little graphic or map that you can analyze and assess for its accuracy. And what we're looking for when we're talking about assessing accuracy is how our error compounds. We're talking about a compass, which is going to be fluctuating. So our angles that we're taking from point to point, they're not going to be perfect, nor is that the design of the lab. But if we're off a degree or two, we're going to have fun with that, because our gap distance at the end is going to be a little ways off, and we'll see what that looks like here when we demo our lab out in the GIS. But so also your pace isn't going to be extremely accurate either. They're estimations, but that's what these little traverses are in basic field mapping. So you'll repeat the process over here of all of your points. Again, maybe you have eight points, 8 to 10 points is completely fine for this. And, mix them up at different angles like we have here. These are not perfect 90-degree angles. They're all, just different angles, and that's what makes this fun. So at the end, and we'll take a look at this when we have a closed traverse. I will highly doubt that your end point from where your last feature was here. This may be point F up here. I highly doubt that your closing shot when you map this is going to line up perfectly. You might find that your closure is way over here. When you actually map this, so you're going to have a huge gap distance, and that's what we're going to analyze. Ultimately, we're looking at what we're going to define as our error ratio. Our error ratio. So that's going to be a ratio of the number of here's an example. The one that we'll demo later, I think, had an error ratio of like 1 to 40. So that means for every 40 feet of a traverse, means for every 40 feet of this total length of our traverse here, every 40 feet, there's 1 foot of error, one direction or another, lengthwise or angular wise. And so what we're trying to do is to look at that error ratio and say, wow, I did a pretty decent job according to maybe my compass and my pace. Or if not, maybe there was an erroneous feature that you mapped. Instead of maybe from C, if we were mapping from C to point D here, that would have been the normal line, but maybe when you mapped it, your line was going in the wrong direction down here. So you're going to be able to see that when you map it. And so when we think about, does it make sense? Knowing what quadrant you're in when you're writing down your data values, be thinking of that. Is it logical? Does it make sense? for what we're doing. So let me ask a question here. Let's say, see if I can write another one up here. Let's say we had an error ratio of, which one is better here? I'm going to write one up here. 1 to 5 or 1 to 50. Which one is better? This one or this one? 1 to 5 or 1 to 50 for an error ratio?
1 to 50.
1 to 50. Let's see. Who is that? Pear or Shay? I mean,
Yeah, Shay.
Shay, why is that?
You're covering more ground with less error that way. So yeah, I can't explain it well, but
Yeah, no, that's right.
So,
That's right.
so John, this is Jerry. So 1 and 50 would be, say, 1 foot of deviation over 50 feet.
50 feet of your traverse. Yeah. So if you had like a 1 to 5 or like a horrible, the worst would be like a 1 to 1. It means for every foot of your traverse along here, for every foot that you go, there's 1 foot of error, which means that for each foot you go, this line is moving in a direction where it shouldn't be. But if we have a 1 to 50, that means that's pretty good. Like, let's say this was I'm making that up. What was that one? A 40-foot line here. Basically saying that this line is right on, approximately, if it was a 1 to 50 error ratio. And then as we go a little bit further here, maybe there's, a foot of error introduced now total. But if it was a 1 to 1, I mean, boy, we could be way off the page here, So I don't think anybody's going to have a 1 to 1, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of us were like 1 to 7 or 1 to 8 or 9 or something like that. But I'd expect your error ratios to come back pretty crude, so your gap distance, I would expect to be somewhat large in here, but that's part of the fun of this. You're not getting graded on your accuracy. You're graded on the fun of it, the creativity, and how well, you think about that. So when you're explaining, what could be reasons for this gap distance, in our error assessment, when we're talking, describing that in our reports, it could be, well, gosh, could be another thing. It could have been my pace and my compass readings. That's a given that all of us should talk about. But it could be like, well, why is that? Maybe was part of my pace compromised when I was going up a hill? Maybe on a certain section of my traverse, maybe it was a little bit worse than others. That was one limitation in Pro that I have not been able to figure out, and I'm sure it's in there, but I can't figure out where the adjusted values are in Pro to help analyze. We can definitely make the error ratio happen, but in other words, like, can we tell where maybe something didn't go quite right in our survey? I could find it in ArcGIS Desktop, but I don't know where it is in Pro. I haven't been able to find it. It's not going to derail our fun or anything like that, but having a more breakdown of actual versus residual values, in our error assessment, it adds a little more fodder to our discussion, but we'll do with what we can. And if you want to use desktop, you could follow those instructions and talk about those residual values. But if we're doing the Pro version that we'll learn about here soon, if you could find it in there somewhere, great. But if you can't, don't worry about it. And we'll just talk error ratio.
John, I got a question.
Yep.
Sorry, I was taking notes. How do you figure out that error ratio?
The software is going to do that for us.
Oh, software is okay.
Yep. So what we're doing here is just kind of talking conceptually. When you all are out and you're in the field there, you're first, again, you're going to want to find a nice site. Kind of canvas it out, see what's out there, see if you can identify like 8 to 10 points that you want to collect, and have a little field sketch like we're doing here now, and determine a starting place like we have right here. And wherever that starting place is, wherever your last feature is, you'll want to cite back to that, because we're creating a closed traverse, which really means for us a polygon. That's what a closed traverse is. So we're going to have a closed traverse. Everything will be kind of buttoned up. But when we map this, initially we're going to make line files so that you can see this big gap distance in here. And that gap distance, the software it's fun. It's visually, it's like, oh man, was I really that terrible at recording distances? No, it's just a product of the limitations of the technology that we were using. But nevertheless, we're going to record point to point our azimuth and our distance. And, you know, you may want to include notes on there too, like maybe you want to include in your, you know, name category or something like, or notes that it might be like a storm drain or a light pole or, you know, whatever that might be for you to help. But that's the general process. You're just going to go point to point and take a recording. And I was going to pull up my compass app here, but in taking a look at some of the videos there that we went through last week on compasses, is anyone confused about how to take a compass reading? I think that's a big question right now that I have to make sure that we're all feeling okay with that.
Can you review it? I think I got it, but I want to see you walk through it.
Okay, yeah, and I'll do the best I can here with our with what I have here. But so on our, you know, I'm using my phone here right now. Let focus. Okay. All right. We can kind of see it there. So if you have your compass like on your phone that you want to use, this is totally fine. And what you want to do is be holding this thing fairly square in your hand so that, you know, those crosshairs that are in the center. Let me turn off these notifications here. Okay. It's not jumping up as well. We'll try to do that here. So you want to take those crosshairs and make sure that's being held flat in your hand, or you'll see that kind of skew off there. You want those crosshairs, you know, kind of aligning. And then what you'll be doing, you know, is you stand over your point or stand right next to it, holding your phone flat in your hand. And then what you're doing is you're going to line up your line of sight. So basically take your hand with your phone and point it towards your feature, like your point B, which you're, you know, whatever you're looking at. So I'm going to just pretend here as we're looking on the screen, I'm standing on my point A and this big line right up here is pointed to my point B, or the feature that I'm interested in taking an angle of measurement to. So I'm holding that in my hand and I'm going to point that line right at my feature. So whatever angle that is, your phone will adjust to that. What we're interested then in looking at, see if I can get this to balance okay here, will be your, this is your line of sight and will record your angle of measurement. So here I'm between 210 and 240. What quadrant am I in? I'm past 180, but I'm not yet to 270. So it's telling me that whatever I'm reading here is, well, I mean, it's southwest quadrant, but we're not thinking of it like southwest, northwest, or anything totally here, but should be thinking of it as it relates to north. So here's my north, you know, and this is going to my 90 over here, and then 180, so I'm past 180 here, but so to record that, and this might differ from different people's phones, but for mine, like if I just tap on my phone up here, it's going to give me my angle. So it's saying, okay, that's 220 degrees is my angle, my Z, my azimuth to my point B. So again, holding that in my phone, or holding my phone in my hand flat, using the line of sight there, the big arrow at the top to line up with my point B. Then I'm just going to tap. Here's another one. Let's say my feature was this way. Okay, let's say I'm looking at it now. Line of sight is facing this way, and I'm just going to tap that line up there and saying, okay, that is my angle that I'm going to record to, maybe it's point C. So it's 178 degrees. That is my Z from, let's say, B to C or whatever. Now I'm just going to pace that off with my pace to determine my distance between each one of those. Does that make sense? Does that help, Steve? Yes, not quite sure.
Yeah,
Yep, okay, okay. Or anybody else? So I'm either, if people do not have access to a basic, handheld compass, or if you don't have access to a phone or a device that has like a built-in app on it for that, let me know. Otherwise, option B, or the second option would be to just use some class data where the data is already generated for you. Okay, so we understand how to collect an angle of measurement from our point of origin to all the features that we have identified in advance. You want to go through and just check out all of your points beforehand. Make sure you can see them all, from point to point to point. And it's just kind of like playing tag from one feature to the other, and then recording your pace distance to those. Does all that, if none of this, or if you have any questions on anything at this point, throw your hand up in the air or let me know so we can step you through this. We're just talking basically about making sure you have access to how to read a compass and how to determine your pace from point to point and to record it. Okay. All right. Next, then, once you have your pace and your data collected for your pace and your compass area, there's another version that I have as an option. So you all can decide if this works out for you, if you have access to a tape. And that's what we're referring to right here. To the first part of what do you need to collect your own data? It's compass, it's determining your pace. And then here's the optional part. This lab ordinarily uses what we'll call the tape version. So if you have a rollo tape, like 100 feet or something like that, you can actually then go and physically measure the tape distances to all those points. So what do I mean by that? Well, up here, we paced these off, we walked them. So for the tape version, for the tape and compass, will be the same angles or your azimuth or Z readings. The only difference is, so with our tape and compass, if we map out this data, we're going to use the same angles or same azimuth, same points that we did. The only difference is we or you will measure the distances. Measure the distances with a tape, like a rollo tape. So the idea is, in all of this, is that this will become for you kind of a real distance with the tape. And tapes are prone to error too, but that's what's kind of fun is comparing. When we throw another variable in there, sometimes people find that their error comparing the pace and the tape, it's worse for the tape. Maybe it was just unique because of the angles, but it's kind of a fun opportunity to look at. Now, if we change a variable with a real tape distance, then you can compare results between your pace and your tape. So otherwise, the procedure for the whole tape concept is the same. The only thing that you're doing is you're just taping these distances off with a tape, with a rollo tape. Points all stay the same. Your angles all stay the same. So if you were recording your field data, you may want to include another column over here called tape, and then you would record your tape distances. So maybe that was 42 feet instead of 40 feet. And then when you'd go back in, or when we go into the GIS session, you'll make a graphic or a series of graphics and an error assessment of just your pace in compass. Then we'll add a new map pane and we'll repeat the process, but we'll also then map the tape distances in the compass, same compass readings. And you'll be able to compare the two and see how well that, just talk about them. They're not going to be perfect, trust me. It's more for fun. But this part here, our tape, optional. You know, that's what I was referring to this here in the Canvas direction, so that, you know, if you have access to a rollout tape, I think it's great if you can try it. But if you can't, you know, that's okay. So that's why it's an option, because typically when we get together in class, we would all use the same tape measurements, and then we'd all use, you know, our little group individual azimuth or angles. Just out of curiosity, would anyone be interested in trying the tape version of this? You know, you might need a.
I'm going to be.
Jerry, okay. Shay,
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, it's cool if you can do it. It's fun because it gives another element of like.
I bought a
I don't know,
100-foot
data.
tape measure yesterday just for this.
You did, okay. Yep, no, that'll be.
I'm out a whopping total of $12, so I'm not really concerned on that.
No, it's not too bad, not too bad at all. So, but anyway, it's a cool thing if you could try. For the added extra work of it is the only thing different. Just we're going to measure those distances between our points with that tape. Everything else stays the same, so it's not too bad. Okay, let's see here. We did talk about some of the considerations of keeping a nice scalable area for this. Don't make it too large. You know, I mean, that's at your discretion there, but you know, if you think of a larger backyard or something, or a smaller park, you know, that's pretty cool there. But anyway, kind of talked about those. Mix up your angles because that's more fun. You know, we can see our error in there and everything like that. The other part of the lab, I'll come back over here. So I'll make a kind of a sample list here of our points again, like we have them. Okay, I'm going to come back over to the DIGA where we're talking about these triangulation points. And I'd like for everybody to try this, whether or not you can do the tape version or not, it shouldn't matter. Everybody should be able to do the triangulation aspect of this lab, which triangulation is also pretty fun because all it involves is an angle, a recording of 2 different azimuth readings from at least two known points of your closed traverse. Here's what I mean. Let's take a look at that. We're not physically pacing or measuring the distances. We're just taking the angle. So here's what we're talking about. Trying to move around our Zoom window here. You know, my mother would say right now, Jerry or Shay or Steve, she would say, man, I just only called on you 3 guys because you're the top 3 in my window that I can see. She would be all over me for how pitiful my writing was. She'd be like, you need to work on your writing.
John, when I was in middle school, my English teacher banned me from writing in cursive because my handwriting was so atrocious. My nickname for the rest of that school year was Dr. Goodwin. So don't feel too bad.
Yeah, you know, a lot of it is for speed, so I'm not wasting people's time here like I was doing on that sidebar tangent here. But yeah, she was like, you need to write better than that. She'd be hounding me. But in any event, the triangulation, what this means here is citing to an unknown feature. So citing to an unknown feature from 2 or more known features in our traverse. So I was running out of room there on the paper, but triangulation simply is citing to an unknown feature from two or more known features in our traverse, in our closed traverse. Now, these unknown features that we're going to triangulate, they can be inside of our traverse. They can be outside of our traverse. It doesn't really matter. But the point of it is that they are not going to be the features that we took readings and pace and or tape to. There's A, B, C, D, E, F, just A to B, C, D, E, F. Those are our knowns. Those are our known features. Those are the features you are going to select for your traverse outside. So now let's say that we have we'll say that there's a fire hydrant somewhere. We'll say that the fire hydrant is out here. So what we would do when you go out into the field, wherever your study area is, try to find two. We're trying to find at least 2 points of triangulation, again, either in or out. But what you'll want to do is go to any one of your known features, in this case, A through F, as an example. And let's say we're going to point C. I'm just going to draw in my little compass directions here. And let's say we go from point D as well. We don't care about the distance because triangulation we're using via intersection. In other words, where these lines cross, that will be helpful to determine a feature location. Let's say you're out and you're by a river and you had a feature you wanted to acquire on the other side of the river. Obviously, you're not going to walk across the creek or swim or something. So instead, let's go to some known features that I have in my sketch. And let me just take an angle to those, and where they intersect, that's where that feature is across the river. Nowadays, we'd probably just use some base imagery and things like that or whatnot to identify it, but we're talking primitive compass gear here to understand angles. So what we're going to do, let's say that feature was from C, let's say that was, or Z, or azimuth in this case, was, we'll say 70 degrees. 70 degrees. So we were at point C, and we were sighting to a fire hydrant. We know that it's somewhere out here, but we don't know how far. But we know that our angle was 70 degrees. So 70 degrees. We know it's somewhere along this line. So our angle right here, 70 degrees. From 0 towards 90, 70 degrees. Now we also then were up at point D, and we also sighted to that same fire hydrant from point D. Now let's say our angle at point D, let's say that was 120 degrees. So we're past 90 degrees, but not yet to 180. We know that our feature was somewhere along that 120 degree angle, from our 0 line past 90 down to 120 approximately here. Z of 70 and our Z of 120. Where these two lines intersect would be where our fire hydrant in this example would be located. So what I'd like to have you do is pick out, see if you could try to find two features, two unknowns, and then cite to them, using a manner similar like this. Now it can be any point. I mean, you could cite to that fire hydrant from point A as well, or B, or E, or F, or however many points you have in there. But the idea is to become familiar with angles. And when we map this in our system, we're not really concerned with the distance. We're looking at where they intersect, and then we can label a point with that too. Does that make sense? for folks.
Yes.
I'm a little confused, John. So these are just like two arbitrary features we're going to use. They're not going to be as a point A, B kind of thing.
Correct. Yep. Correct.
And we're just getting the line of sight to them.
Correct. Yeah, and that could be, it could be anything that we're interested in. You know, it could be a mailbox, you know, it could be anything that's beyond our normal, let's say 8 points. Let's say you have 8 points that you're doing for your closed traverse. These triangulation points are just purely random features. Are like, yeah, let me take a site to that mailbox. Or I know it's not part of my survey here at my closed traverse. I don't care. I want a site to that mailbox from any two of my known points, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F in this example. We just happened to cite to that feature that didn't happen to be part of our closed traverse for whatever reason, but we're still interested in physically mapping that, you know, bringing it back in. And the whole idea with this is to learn how to incorporate angles and distances, you know, into our data. So it's just another way to show you that we can use angles to locate features and not always have to worry about distance. Does that help, Shay, or do you want me to keep going?
No, that's yeah. So yeah, it's just we're not going through all of our traverse points. It's just unknown feature, 2 points. Got it. Kind
Yep.
of. Yep.
Just
Okay.
find two unknown points out there that are beyond your A through F or whatever, A through H or however many points you have that are not included as your normal stops. Like first, what I would recommend, well, it depends how efficient you want to be, but I would go through and do your pace, you know, find the points you want to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, you know, if there are 8, and then get your pace to all those and then come back and like, okay, I had my A through H. Let me try to find some other sites that I don't care. I'm not going to walk to them or anything. I just want to identify them in my graphic when I'm done. The point of understanding, you know, angles and stuff like that. Just go to any one of your 2 known points and cite to that unknown feature, and then we can later map that.
Cool. Thanks, John.
You know, I mean, if you want to be more efficient, you know, Shay, other people, you know, you can determine your main 8 points or whatever, figure out what those are, your A through H or whatever. And you can say, like, you know what, I'm going to take that mailbox. I'm going to shoot that tree over there. They're not part of my known points that I'm interested in. And then when you actually go around your main A through H, stop at, you know, point D and take a reading to that mailbox and take another one from E, you know, as you're going around if you want to be really efficient. But if it's simpler, just do your A through H, get your distances down, and then look at some triangulation points. We'll do a demo of that though. So no problem. Anyone else, questions or anything confusing? Again, we've never really done this one remotely, so it's trying to do my best to explain some things. And certainly, you know, for this week too, what I would do before you even start this is go back and go up and watch some of the videos. They're relatively short. And I have a couple videos posted in week 2. So the general overview and process for field data collection, this basically steps you through exactly what we're talking about here now, how to, you know, line up your line of sight, how do you take a compass reading, you know, with a physical compass, not your phone, and then go point to point to point. And then I do have one main version here of data entry for the lab using Kogo for desktop that you see there. In Pro, we're going to cover tonight. So, you know, if you want to use desktop, you know, you could watch this video here too. There'd be some good insight in there. Otherwise, just follow along with Pro tonight. You could probably figure out Pro anyway, just from watching the desktop version and whatnot. But anyway, I do want to just pull up some general board photos that I'd written on the board there just to talk through some things. These are always good to look at and just think about. Make sure that we're not forgetting anything. So yeah, we mainly talked about this understanding, you know, azimuth from a standpoint of direction and distance. And here we have our Z, our 0 to 360. We have some other examples, I think, over here on the left of some triangulation. You know, looks like here from intersection, just from two or more known points. In the upper right, you'll see that there are three main goals of this lab. Taking our pace distance and our compass reading. And then you'll see that there's the tape version, which is again just using only the physical tape distances or the real distances. So both the pace and again the tape are using the same azimuth readings. The last portion is going to collect a couple of triangulation points. So just a couple of those. You see one huge big question right here, right in the middle. Let's see here. Hopefully everybody can see that right now, because it's going to be one that's going to save you if you remember to do this at every single point. That key question is, does it make sense? Meaning, if your compass is pointing north, it should be pointing north, magnetic north, but you're turning when you're taking a reading and north is just maybe 10 degrees from you and you're reading, 200 degrees, something's not going to be right there. So you need to be thinking like, okay, this isn't right. So always orient yourself with north as your zero line. That's going to be your zero azimuth, and then keep in mind your 90-degree intervals. So does it make sense? Those are some big ones for us to think about. So we did talk here about, and really over on the board here, we're talking about this error ratio, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, 1 to 2, 1 to 35. The higher the number over here, the better, as we talked, but this is what we're going to be making here. We're going to be demoing this out here next. That in the green, this was the original traverse here as it was mapped. And you see that when we map this, here's that huge gap distance that we were talking about. Are you all able to see that on my computer screen here? Give me a thumbs up or say yes or no there just to make sure. Good? Okay, thanks, Shay. So when we map this the first time, this is more than likely what our feature will look like. There's going to be a gap distance right here. This gap distance from our start to our end. This is going to give us our error ratio that we're interested in. Now, when we come back, we're going to map this basically twice then, which we'll call a corrected version of our pace, in which case then what will happen is this line, the software is going to be doing this for us, will be adjusted so that it can close. So that here you see kind of more the perfect closure. So when that happens, when we run through a closure, each one of these points basically are moved in a direction and in a certain distance for that closure. And ArcGIS Desktop did a nice job of telling us the direction each one of those points had to move and for how far. This was really helpful because we could see in our traverse where we may have went wrong. Haven't, again, found out where to find this in Pro. I'm not sure, I've been looking at it for days. So if you do stumble across this in Pro, it's cool, bring it in and certainly talk about it. If not, the best we're gonna have is just to talk about the error ratio, and that's fine. And being able to think like, okay, where did maybe the error go wrong? You have to be thinking about, when I was collecting data, did something, was there a steep hill? Was it slippery, or whatever? Was it, what were some potential sources of error? But that's what we're going to be mapping here next right now. And of course, the tape distance is here. This was from a classic, maybe I think last year or the year before. But in general, that's what some just content board photos to think about. And then where are we at here? Okay, zip file and whatnot. So check out at least the lab overview. It's a 3-minute video on your own there. But under activities and assignments, if everybody can please go into that area inside of Canvas right now. Give folks a second to do that. Week 2 lab guide. Contained within this folder, as you're looking at that, there are 2 different directional, workflows. One is for ArcGIS Desktop. That's number 2 on the list there. And the first one is ArcGIS Pro. Doesn't matter to me which one you use. In general, both will give us the same results. Desktop may, at this point, give us a little bit more on the reporting. However, it's not a limitation really for the lab. So will be okay. I think there's enough documentation out there on desktop that you can go through that if you wish, with videos and whatnot. I'm gonna take you through Pro next. Here are some lab report guidelines. Encourage you to look at those. They are considerations for what you may want to include in your lab write-ups, dealing with figures, thinking about carefully communicating graphics in your work. What do you need to be aware of? So I'll let you check that out. There's also a pace and compass sample template of what your data will look like in a text document. I'll show you this in Pro in a minute. So if you ever enter data into your ArcPro session or whatnot, you can export that data out and it will give you like a text file of your work. This is also helpful that if you ever had data that you had entered in a text file, you could automatically load it in as a traverse into either your desktop or Pro session. But nothing super critical with the pace and compass template here. There's also a sample write-up here, a sample lab report. This is from a few years ago. If you're wondering, gosh, well, what could I possibly include? This is an example of a write-up. Your write-ups do not need to be double spaced. They do not need to be an APA or anything like that. I'm not really worried about that. I'm worried about our learning at this point. But if it makes sense for you to use APA or something like that, you can certainly do that. Just be consistent right now. But again, I've never had an alum come back and say, man, I'm sure glad I learned APA or MLA or whatever. No one's ever said that. Now, I think being so focused on a formatting at this stage of the game, it's taken away from what it is we're supposed to be doing, which is learning and reflecting. So write it up in a manner of your choice. But here's an example of what some groups did. They talked about weather conditions, who is in their group at this time, general notes and azimuth and a field sketch, which might be kind of cool to put in there. And so that they kind of did a pace and a tape comparison here. You can see those gap distances. That's what you will be interested in when yours come back. When you input your data, yours will look like this. And so this is an unclosed traverse. So again, we're interested in assessing that error gap. So what they did is they ran their error assessment for some of their closure information there. You can see their error ratios were not too bad, actually, in this case. And so you'll be having something like this too, reporting out on just your error ratio, like whatever that ratio is, 1 to 20, 1 to 10, whatever. Then they also had one with their tape. And you'll notice that their tape version was a lot better. Here they had 1 to 153, and here was 1 to 128. So it's fun if you can do the tape to compare those and actually talk about or think about, gosh, what could have made my tape more accurate or not? Sometimes it goes the other way. So these are the residual values that I mentioned that I haven't been able to find in Pro. In desktop you can, but it helps to say, okay, 0.1 was adjusted at this azimuth, or I'm sorry, it was adjusted this many degrees. So it was like 0.8 degrees, but for 38 feet instead of 40 feet. Here, so it's kind of explaining how the points had to move in order to close your traverse. Again, I can't find that in Pro, but I'm sure it's in there somewhere. But don't worry if you don't have this in there, if you use Pro. Then after you close your traverses, this is what they'll look like. And here are a couple of examples of triangulated lines, again, that were used from 2 of our known features there. So no problem. Here's a sample comparison. Here we have our closed traverse with our pace corrected and pace uncorrected. So I would encourage you to develop something very similar to this so that you can kind of see that overlay of your pace. And then I would have another graphic that outlines, maybe from a separate map pane or a map view window, something that illustrates your tape if you were able to use the tape. Again, the tape is optional for this year there, just because we don't have access to the tape for us all. But certainly if you can do it, it's cool. And then here's one with some triangulated, one of the corrected versions. In this case, they used the tape and dropped in their triangulation lines. So that's an example, but your graphics might look something similar to this. hopefully that gives you some ideas. Again, yours doesn't have to look exactly like it, but maybe some similarities here and there. Questions about anything that you've maybe seen up to this point? Okay. Then I think we're ready to start the process for field mapping. So again, check out some of the other information under option 1 there. We kind of talked about recording that information and angles, but 8 to 10 points is good. No problem on that. All right, well, let's go ahead and fire up Pro if you wish to do that in Pro. That's great. I will do the same, but I can't be on the network here right now, so otherwise my Pro doesn't work. Okay. Just to make sure before I launch ahead, if you need to stretch for like 2 minutes, we can certainly do that, or forge ahead. Let me know your preferences.
I wouldn't mind a 2-minute break if that's possible.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it either.
Okay, let's take a little break, and then when I see you all back with your screens going, or otherwise in the chat, please let me know. All right, welcome back, everyone. And what we'll be doing now is taking you through a demonstration of working through one of the lab guides. These lab guides are found in Canvas underneath the assignments and activities. This one that we'll be working through right here is ArcGIS Pro, a general lab guide. So it doesn't mean that it spells out every single little detail, but it's going to give you enough to complete the lab for this week. Likewise, if you prefer to use ArcGIS Desktop, that desktop version, the recording is made available for you in Canvas as well. You can look at that for more information. But again, these are guides. So let's go ahead and start by opening up that Word document or your lab guide here. And the design or the objective of this is the whole lab is to familiarize yourself with the setting up and accomplishing, recording a basic closed traverse survey, and then exploring the error associated with that. We went through everything that you will need to use, the compasses, things like that, your pace, and of course the tape to measure the actual distances. Again, optional, but if you can do it, that's great. Here's some general things to think about. Explore that survey site, like we were mentioned, record your pace. If you want to work with someone locally on this, you sure can. It may be a little difficult, but I'll leave that up to you. If you do want to work with someone, that is fine. And if you do want to work with someone, record your data in groups and only really one lab write-up per team or per group, or what have you. So spelled out most of this already. We're at the entry of the data entry phase. So pick either Pro or Desktop, map your data. That's what this lab guide is going to take you through, as well as how to analyze or at least conduct an error assessment. And then spells out some general details of what your lab might look like in conjunction with the sample lab right up there we just looked at prior to break. Okay, let's go ahead and start up ArcGIS Pro. And so as you are waiting for my session to start up, first thing, if you want to actually start working ahead, you can do that while mine's booting up here. So open up Pro, start a new map, and you may need to set a directory here to work from, and that's fine. And so I'm going to just start up a new blank template here, and I'm going to save this to my desktop, DIGA615. I'm going to make a new folder here called Base Compass Lab 2, but it's up to you. Call it what you wish. Again, is a good practice. Recall back to Advanced GIS when we were in that in the fall. Try to keep no spaces in your directories if you can, in your folder structures. Shouldn't impact us too much, but if we're working with rasters, it might. So I'm looking at Pace and Compass Lab. Here, I'm going to rename this and we're going to call it 2021. That I'll know here. So I'm going to set that up as my primary primary location here. So anyway, it's just for demonstrative purposes. Okay. So we're doing everything right from scratch. So we'll step through this guide, and if anybody does get saturated and you feel like you need to leave for the night, take a look at the remaining part of the agenda, which essentially accompanies what's in Canvas. You can come back and watch the demo at any time that you wish here. So if you need to leave, I understand it completely. All right. First thing, sometimes people ask, can I use a base map? You can. I would advise against it in round one, because I want you to be able to see what happens with some of our scaling. So our data that we're mapping in the field, it may come as a surprise, but or not, but it's not going to have a projection. It's not going to have a coordinate system. These are just basic field notes. It's basically field mapping is what we're doing. Besides, we're not really worried about a projection at this stage. Furthermore, we don't need one because our scale is such that it's not going to make a difference if we have a projection or not at this point. So I would recommend removing the base map because it can have some differences, like the topographic map or whatever. I would just recommend removing that. And if we use a base map, we're going to be defaulting to some scaling and projection types of things that are going to make our line work a little bit funky. This has always been the case in desktop, and it has been also in Pro with this too, at least for this lab. You can certainly try it with a base map later, but the first go through, I would recommend not using a base map for this lab to start. If you did have a base map and you wanted to go through this later, I would then zoom into your area, start a new project, and then zoom into like a starting location for where you were, and you could try it. Maybe it'll work for you, but I suspect there'll be some challenges. So now in Pro, in number 2, what we're going to do right off the bat is select the Edit tab in Pro, and then click Manage Edit. So I'm under the Edit tab up here. And what I'm interested in doing is really setting up some, I'll call it the preamble or kind of the preliminary things. And I'm under my Edit tab. I'm going under my Manage Edit little call out options here. And under the top up there, it says Project under our units. This is going to be an important one for us to do because we're going to be setting really our mapping distances for what we're going to be doing when we're editing, in other words, creating our features. So in the Pro session here, you'll notice what to set. So under the Units tab, we're going to set our direction units to North Azimuth. So go ahead and set your direction units to North Azimuth. And that is important for us right now that we can see that the original default is set to quadrant bearing. On our compasses, we've been talking about our 0 to 360. All right, so we need to make sure that when we're entering our data that it follows the 0 to 360 nomenclature style. So we're going to come away up to the top here and select North Azimuth. So make sure that's selected as North Azimuth. Then we're also going to set our angular units to degree. And there's a little graphic in there as well, but angular units to degree, and then distance units and area units, basically everything else to feet. So angular units to degree. And that might be a default there. So just degrees or degree there. So angular units is fine. But everything else here, distance units, that's in feet. So we're okay there. Area units should be in square feet. So we're good there as default. So that's looking good. Location units, we're going to change to feet as well. So location units and feet, and everything else should be okay. Page units we're not super worried about here. Mainly it's the direction and some of our distance and locational units. So let's go ahead and select OK. So we have part 1 done. So, your graphic will look similar. We just went through it there, but you can check the graphic out as you wish. Okay. Next on your table of contents, under the drawing order, let's go ahead and right click on your map. Then we're going to select the properties and we're going to set our display units to feet as shown below. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to select our map over here. We're going to right click, go to properties. And then we're going to set our display units to feet. And this is because we're going to be out there measuring our pace on our tape and feet and whatnot. And I also recommend at this point setting that reference scale to 1,000 feet.
John?
Yep.
Back up a little bit. The display units, those are feet and those are US feet. What is the difference between the two?
That's a good question. I don't know if it really makes a difference on that, but yeah, I don't know what, I'm not sure, truthfully.
Fair enough.
I don't know if it's like a engineer, I'm guessing if it's like an engineering version of feet versus like a traditional, 12-inch, inches and feet, or I don't know. I don't know on that, actually. It's a good question. Anybody know by chance that might have worked with this? Or with US feet or feet? Just being honest, Jerry. Not sure.
Looks like there's a pair here. Looks like there's an ISO standard for feet, and that looks like that might be different than the US standard for feet. I'm just Googling it here.
That's pair, yeah, okay.
So
I think, yeah, so I don't know if that will have any impact on our work here or not. I suspect not, but you could try it twice, change those settings,
It might be international feet. There's usually international feet versus US feet.
Oh, okay. Jenny, I think Jenny they're talking.
Yeah,
So Jenny, should we try US feet?
I probably would, yeah.
Okay, so everybody change that up. Here we go. Thank you, Jenny. That's
I
great.
mean, they're pretty close. I mean, as far as they're pretty close. So as long as you would, like note it in your metadata, which one you used, if you were writing metadata, obviously, but you could just put it in the report, which one you used.
Oh, that's a great point. Jenny, thank you for bringing that up too, because anytime that we're building a workflow like we're doing here in our labs, that workflow, all the steps that we take will end up with an outcome.
Yeah.
And being able to document, per what Jenny was saying there, is really good to take note of. Could it be a potential source of error if you use one or the other? I guess it's the radar's up, to look at. So for everybody, and I'll change this up too here. We'll change this to US feet here. I'll have to go back and do that there. But thanks, Jenny, and Per for bringing that up, and Jerry actually for the question to begin with. So little things like that if folks see, bring those up. We can help shape that lab a little bit more. Okay. So the other thing I was going to set our reference scale to 1 to 1,000, and I haven't seen this be a big factor here in Pro, but in desktop it was, where if we didn't enforce a reference scale, basically we couldn't see any of our features. And I don't know, part of it was because we didn't have a coordinate system defined for our data. That was one part. But again, I'm trying to limit problems like with dealing with base maps at this stage and whatnot. So haven't seen it be an impact here, but it might be good right now to set this reference scale at 1 to 1,000, and then we can go ahead and select OK. All right. Now where we're at number 4. So in your catalog pane or your view window for catalog, usually popped up for me on the right there. Let's go ahead and in here, and for now we're just going to create 2. I'm going to create 2, just two shape files in here, and make sure they're polylined. At a later date you can come back in here and add your tape and tape correct it if you want to do that. But for right now, we're just going to add in. I'm going to add in just a pace and pace corrected just for the time being. Let's see. Move this out of the way. Okay. So in my catalog pane over here on the right, go ahead and navigate. You may have to set up a new folder connection or something like that. I'm going to add a folder connection just to my C drive here for my folder. But if you have another way that works best for you, you'll follow your lead for that. Okay. That Zoom window is always getting in the way for everything here, but all right. So now once we're inside of that folder, let's go ahead and create again like at least a pace and a pace corrected. So the first one's going to be our first original pace is going to have our error in it, our gap distance. The second one will be just a repeat of what we entered, but we're going to close our line to generate our error ratio. Okay, so to do that here, I have some graphics in there just in number 4. I'm going to right click on my folder and select new, and then shapefile. So if you're working ahead, that's totally fine. So make sure you're in the right folder and make sure you're creating a polyline, not a polygon. So say that one more time as you're working ahead here. Polyline, not a polygon. So if we create a polygon when we're done, it's just going to snap the end to the beginning. We're not going to be able to see our error. Make sure you have a polyline. Feature class, I'm going to call this one pace. And again, we won't have any coordinate system in here for this one. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to make another one in here now, pace uncorrected. Oh, I'm sorry, pace corrected. I mean, sorry about that. I'm just following along here, pace. We have pace and pace corrected. So should have at least those two, at least for the demo here tonight. Again, a polyline. We'll go ahead and run that. Okay, all is looking okay there. So pace and pace corrected. All right. I'm going to come back over to my catalog window and check out some of our features in there, our shape files. Okay. Now, once we have our files loaded in our directory structure, we can go ahead and bring those into our view window, into our map window. And this gets a little bit goofy in here, but this happened in desktop as well. And so we kind of just have to work through some of the nuances. And this is mainly to enforce a reference scale that we can see our data when we're entering it. That's the whole purpose of a lot of this gobbledygook here in number 5. Let's go ahead and add those files into our table of contents, into our map window, and then we're going to zoom to layer of one of our features. It doesn't matter what we're doing here, but as you look down at the bottom, we see this really large, huge coordinate value, and that's fine. But if we start to map our data at this scale, our lines we're not even gonna be able to see them. They're gonna be so tiny. So what we're gonna do is I'm just going to right click on pace or pace corrected, it doesn't matter. Let's say zoom to layer. And so now we're basically all the way out here. And I'm gonna check my map here again, my map properties, just to make sure that we're all set up in here and that's still good. Okay. And so now, once we've zoomed to one of our zoom to layer there, next, change that scale in the lower left of your map window to 1 to 1,000. You should see very, very small numbers. Your numbers might look similar to this. And that's to make sure that when we start mapping this, our scale isn't going to be so out of whack that you won't be able to see your line. So I'm going to change this here. Mine is like 1 to whatever it is, huge, 1 to 1,000. And that's going to pull me in. And now you see that the numbers at the bottom part of my screen are really small. They're like 65 or 32 or whatever it is. Or that's good. That's going to tell us that we're just kind of in general mapping units with our units of feet for our measurement. And that's what we want to see when we start adding in our traverse here. Okay. All right, here. So let's go ahead and we're going to start editing now our pace file first. And so I'm going to give you some hypothetical numbers to enter in here so you can follow along with me so you can understand how this works. So first we're going to make our paste. So we're going to see all of our errors, and then we're going to come back and edit our paste corrected and get a chance to correct those. So number 6, let's start the edit tab, and then we'll go ahead and modify features. So edit tab, and I'll modify features. All right, now what we're going to do here is we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom of that modify, almost all the way to the bottom, or you can run a search for it too. But we're looking for Kogo. And so I'm under modify features here on my screen, and at the bottom there's Kogo coordinate geometry, useful for parcel mapping and things like that. The new like Pro itself has a lot of really cool functions in it that desktop doesn't have. And that, so Pro brings a lot of really cool things in there for that. There's some little nuances, like I said, that kind of derail us, but overall, Pro has a lot of cool functionality. But let's go ahead and click the traverse function right here. Okay, so now that we have that going, let's make sure that our layer that we're editing, like on my screen here, is we're editing our paste layer. We want to make sure that we're always checking this, making sure that we're editing the correct layer here. Know what layer we're editing. Here I have paste set up. And okay, so we're seeing all of that. Next, what we're going to do is set a starting location. And what I like to do is set this depending on when you go in and you make your field measurements, you're going to know the general orientation of what your graphic might look like. So I would try to set up your starting point in a way such that, you know, when you start mapping it, you'll be able to see all of your points easily enough. So how we do that is just a matter of your own preference. So, okay, so let's go ahead and start a location, and then we'll see a little like a little red square or whatnot come up on that. So we'll go ahead and take you through this process of number 7. All right. So I'm going to set a starting point somewhere down here, maybe in the lower left. All right, so we have a little red square there. That's our start. So think of that as our point A, if you will. Next, you'll notice over here on the right, you'll see a direction and a distance and a radius. We're not doing anything with a radius here now, but I have some sample data that we're going to use. And this is made up data. It's just made up data to give you an idea of a general sample. So this consists of about 8 points, similar to what you may want to do. But these are just random points here that kind of mimic the lab in Minneapolis a little bit, but it's not identical. So first off, we have our North Azimuth spelled out here. So I'm going to give you some numbers and you just follow along with me. And I like to use the keypad here, but the first one is 170 degrees. That's our direction, you know, what you took with your compass. So you can either write these down or follow along with me first. Either way is fine. So 170 degrees, and then use the tab key twice. Tab. So we now move over to distance, and our distance will be 40 feet. And then select enter. So I'll give you a minute to check that out. So our first one was 170 degrees for a distance of 40 feet. And when you're done with the distance, make sure you hit enter to close that through. Our next point, so we're going to have, again, 8 points. That was A to B in this scenario. 100 for a distance of 75 feet. So I'll give you a second to add that in as well. So 100 for a distance of 75. And on your screen, you should notice your line work start to populate every time you enter in an arc segment in here. So our next point, this would have been C to D here. So we have 10 degrees. Again, 2 tabs over to our distance column for 65 feet. Then enter. And I'll kind of work ahead a little bit, and then you can kind of follow along here. I'll give you a chance to catch up. And I'll read these back to you as we're going. And one more. Okay, so there we have our a polygon. And again, this is kind of just some made up data, but it's based on some general data. So you can see our endpoint and our starting point are different. But just to make sure everybody was able to get the correct angles, our Z column will be on our left there, and our azimuth, and then our distance and pace, or tape if you wanted it to be, but make believe here, this is our pace column over here, our distance. So I'll read those out in case anybody doesn't have a dual monitor there, but our first one was 170 degrees for a distance of 40 feet. Our second one was 100 degrees for a distance of 75 feet. Our third entry was 10 degrees for a distance of 65 feet. The next entry was 310 degrees for a distance of 30 feet. And then 10 degrees for 125 feet. The next entry was 270 degrees for a distance of 50 feet. And then our seventh entry was 200 degrees for a distance of 80 feet. And then our last entry for our last point, which was heading back to our point of origin or our starting point, which would be point H, I guess, 180 degrees for a distance of 90 feet. So at that point, that took us right down to the hollowed out red square that you see on my screen. So with that being said, we're not going to do anything quite yet. We're going to come back over to our lab guide. And now that we have entered in our data, on my screen right now, you should be seeing exactly the same thing. Actually, the values that I used in our demo right here are in this graphic, so which should be okay. You need to go back and see that. But when we're done with our first pace version, so if you do tape, this will be the same thing you'll see, but your gap distance might be a little more. The only thing to do now for our pace and tape, if we wish to do that, is simply click the finish button located in the map window. I have that in the graphic, or it's at the bottom of your screen right now. Otherwise, you can right click and select finish or finish sketch. But so all we'll do right here is just select the finish button. Or you could right click and select finish sketch too. Either one is okay, doesn't matter. Now what we're going to do is save our edits. We'll say yes, we want to save that. And then we'll move out of modify features. And now we can see if we want to go back to our map tab up here, we can explore this, zoom in on a little bit if we want to, check some things out in there. Just make sure that you can see it nicely in your screen. Okay. So now what we'll do is, so we saved our edits there in letter A there, which was a subcategory. So it was 7A, we just finished up there. So now we'll turn our attention to 7B, which is going back in now and generating our pace corrected version. So here's where we're going to, these are the steps necessary to help you generate an error ratio or an error assessment of what we just mapped. So basically, we're going to repeat the same information twice. But in order to do that, we need to turn on our snapping. So make sure that the snapping is activated in your edit tab. So if we go back over to our edit tab, we're going to turn on our snapping. Okay, mine is set to on already here, but make sure that your snapping is turned on. And now we're going to edit. Basically, we're going to repeat the process here. So let's go up to modify. In our edit tab, we're going to modify. We're going to go right back to Kogo in our traverse function, our traverse tools. And we're going to make sure that our layer that we're editing right here is our pace corrected version, because we're going to correct this line feature. In other words, we want to close this. So we're just saying, I'm going to close the pace and we're going to call it pace corrected. So set the starting location. We'll just repeat what we did. Now, hopefully with your snapping, this should snap you to the same starting point as where what we entered for our original paste data. So that should snap you right to the same starting place so that we're not off it or anything. We want this to be an exact overlay. So once that snaps, let's go ahead and left click. Now re-enter the same data that we had before, just repeating. So I had 170 for a distance of 40 again, and I'll just kind of enter. I'll kind of just rattle those out. 100 for a distance of 75 feet, and enter. 10 degrees for a distance of 65 feet. 310 degrees for a distance of 30 feet. 10 degrees for a distance of 125 feet. And then 270 degrees for a distance of 50 feet. And then 200 degrees for a distance of 80 feet. And then our last one, 180 for a distance of 90 feet. As you're entering those in, you should be, these lines should overlay perfectly. If they're off a little bit, it means that either a distance or a direction is wrong. So that should be a good check for you too. So now, before we do anything else, let's go ahead and scroll down here. And we're going to be repeating, obviously, the tape the same way and whatnot, but we should have everything at this point, all of our data entered, but not clicking the finish sketch button yet. So part of the fun is to describe what we're seeing in analysis between our error and our corrected version. But now what we're going to do, which is pretty easy as we're moving to the end of the lab right here, is to simply just click close with since we're editing our paste corrected now, we're just going to click close. And what we'll see, you should see something like this on your screen right now, the gap distance. And when we hit close, there's a little check mark or a checkbox here. We're going to see a misclose ratio. So this is our error ratio that we're after, and a distance of that. So how far it was away, and then also what Shay was talking about earlier. If we have 32 feet, for every 32 feet of error or distance in our traverse, we're going to have 1 foot of error for that. That's what we're going through here. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's just go ahead and click the close button. So now we see that the Zoom window always gets in my way here. The paste corrected closed for us, and it's telling us here that we have a misclose or an error ratio of 1 to 32. And again, that distance or that gap distance is 17.5 feet. So at this point, that information right there is what I'd like to have you include in your lab report, in your lab write-up, as we're looking through that information here to include that and talk about that. What does it mean, and where do you think things maybe went wrong if it didn't work out quite so well? And so with that being said, we can select finish and save our edits in our window here. So we're going to say finish, and then I'm going to save my edits. And then we can, underneath the modify features, earlier in the period we were talking about, how can you download this as a text file? Let's say you wanted to modify it in a text file and upload it back in here. Here's a way that you can do that. And I think I have this written down here in step 8, where it shows how you can export your data as a text file right here. And this is what I'm showing you in number 8. Under the traverse, you can just use the export to export ArcMap traverse file. So here's how to do that. With these little 3 hash lines, the traverse option, we can right click on that and select export traverse file. And then here, we can save that to our folder if we want to do that. We'll call this one lab export. Basically what's going to do is take all the data that we entered in here and write it out to a text file. So that should work for us. So now I'm just going to select back on my modify features, and we have our two shape files done and good to go. Let's go ahead and look at what that text, see what that text file looks like. And here it is, lab export. So this just basically tells us here, tells us our angle and then our distance. So if you ever wanted to, or if you had, let's say you went and collected your information out in the field, you could load it into this text file format like this, and then load it up into ArcGIS Pro and it would map for you. However, in doing so, I don't know if you would be able to realize or see your gap distance, which is part of it in manually like we did as polylines. So, but just an example of what you can do to extract out or preserve your data. Questions or anything like that that folks are having? Okay, perfect. Let's see here. Next, I want to show you what we can do now to add in triangulation lines. So, and maybe our points too. So I'm going to actually jump around here. I'm going to go to number 11 first, and we're going to add our points in here. So I have point A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H in here. Then we'll come back and we'll add our triangulation lines in here to show you how to do that. So I would encourage you all to build or include or add a point file in here as well into your session. And so to do that, we're going to go back over here to our catalog pane, our catalog window. I'm going to load in here. I'm going to right click and say new. And I'm going to add a new file in here, a new shape file. We're going to call this a point. So a point feature. We're just going to call this one lab points, or whatever you want to call that. It doesn't necessarily matter. But our lab points are our features. We're going to run that. Okay, make sure it's a point file. All right, we're done with our geoprocessing. So now we have our lab points in here. What we want to do, and I'm going to turn off my original paste and just focus on the corrected version here, my corrected map, because now we can drop some of our features on here for fun and mapping. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and right click on our lab points or whatever it is that you may have called that. And I'm going to open up my attributes. And so we have our default items, our ID, shape here, and things like that. I want to add a new column in here or a new attribute. So I'm going to select add right here, just on my attributes. I'm not editing it yet. We're just adding a new field name. And I'm going to call my name, just name of the point. You know, that's simple. I'm going to set my data type to a text type. So I can type in, you know, point A or point B or point C. So under the field name, I just gave a name. If you want alias, whatever, you can put that as a name. Then way over on the far right, there's a length column. You know, we don't need that super long there. So I'm just going to set that to maybe 15 characters and enter, you know, through that. So give everybody a second just to look at that. Come back over to the side here. Again, just opened up the lab points and then selected to do that. Just add a field in there. Entered the field name and the data type for text, because we're going to just be typing text in here. Or be creative, have some fun, see what else you can generate out of here. That's okay. And the length, we just shortened up the field length there. Okay, so I'm going to close this. Say yes to our saving our edits here. We're saving our changes. Almost done, folks. Hang with me. We're almost there. And if you need to leave, this is all recorded, and I understand. So, all right, let's go ahead and add our points in here briefly. And so to do that, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so I can see all of my features in here. So here we started off with our starting point. This is our point A. And now I'm going to go in here, and this is what we're talking about here in number 11. We're going to edit, our snapping's still on. So we're going to come down here and modify, or not modify, but actually create some points in here. So we're going to create points in our edit tab. And our lab points, so we're interested in just simply creating, we're going to create a feature. We're going to create a point feature. That's all we're doing here. So under lab points, under the create features window here, we're going to come down and drop a point in here. I need to scroll back up here so I can see a little bit more what I'm doing. Okay. So here was our starting point, and the point A. Here we go. There's different approaches that you can use to go through this. Sometimes in our total station lab, I would recommend dropping a point, adding the information, dropping a point, adding the information, because you have so many points, you could lose track of that. In this lab, we really only have 8. So I think it's okay just to go in order. Right now, dropping our points, here's C, D, E, F, G, and H. So we have those points dropped in onto our map. Now what we can do is come back over here to our table. And what I like to do is left click on each one of these rows, and to make sure that the attribute that I'm giving the actual feature is in fact represented for what is highlighted. So we know that this was point A. This is where we started off. So I'm going to double click in here and just type in here point A. And then enter. And odds are these are going to flow okay, but just to make sure.
John?
Yep.
I do have a question. I apologize. I'm still figuring some of these things out with Esri, but the create features panel, I am struggling to figure out how to get it up.
Okay. So let's see here. So Jerry, if you click the edit tab up there, up on the top of your main menu there, the edit tab, and then right next to the snapping, there'll be a little button or a little button for create. Does that help? Okay, perfect. Trust me, it takes me, there's so many buttons and so many rabbit holes to go down here with Pro. It does take a while. So once you have the create button pushed there, then we'll just go over and select the lab points, and then it'll be the first option. If you hover your cursor over that, it'll say point, and then create a point feature. Okay. Is that good there, Jerry? Yep, okay. So now what I'm doing here down below in the lab points, I'm just scrolling through and just left clicking on my rows to make sure that I'm correctly attributing the points that I have, to make sure that they are in fact in order. So if you're following along with me, just double check those, and you can enter all these in, all of your labels. So this is exactly what you'll be doing with your own data. And always click enter every time that you're adding an attribute or whatnot. Make sure you click enter to correctly close that line out, or close that entry out. Okay, so all is looking good here for our points. So very good. We have our points all entered in here. This is looking good. Now what we can do is let's go ahead and save our edits. And that's under the edit menu drop down there. So save all your edits. Yes. And then we are going to clear our selection up here under the edit menu here. We're just going to clear just so we don't have anything selected. So clear our selection. Okay, again, all this is being recorded, folks. You can go back in and check this out as you wish. I'm going to close my lab attribute table. And just in my map window, my map pane now, I'm just going to explore and just bring this back over, meaning our features here, just so we can see those a little bit more clearly in the center of the screen. Now let's go ahead and label this. Label our points. So I'm going to right click on label points, and I'm going to come down here to where it says label properties. So I guys right clicked on label points, or I'm sorry, my lab points, right click on that. It's getting late. Label properties. Okay, so it shows some of the fields available for us to label. And the field that we're interested in labeling is not really the feature ID or anything. Instead, we're interested in the name, our name attribute. So I'm just clicking down where it says ID, and maybe there's another easier way to do this too, and that's fine for you. So I'm just going to double click here on the field name. Oh, let's back that up here. So this should be okay for us. Now I'll say apply. So what we're going to do is label the attribute, label our features with what each feature is represented at with the name attribute. So let's go over here to our points, right click, and then we'll just select label. And there are all of our points in there. So that is one way of completing number 11 on here. So kind of working with the labeling notations on there. And that in general is the last step, but I do want to just show you briefly how to add your triangulation lines in. This is pretty simple, pretty straightforward here. We'll add one more file. We're going to add one more shapefile to our session, and we'll call that one, again, it's another polyline shapefile to our catalog. We're going to call it triangulation lines or whatever you want to call that. Once we have that created, let's go ahead and start editing that. So we'll go back into create under our edit menu. But first, let's go back to our catalog window. I'm just going to close out of those create features and everything. And once I'm in my catalog, going into my folder, right click and then new. Down to shapefile. And I'm using shapefiles. If you all want to use something else, that's fine too. That's okay. I like shapefiles. They're just a little bit quicker to demonstrate what we're trying to do. And then, so polyline, we'll call this one triangulation lines. So triangulation lines and a polyline. We'll go ahead and create that. And then close out of our geoprocessing window over here on the right. Move our zoom window. Okay, now we have our triangulation lines listed in our table of contents on the left. So now let's pretend that we have some, let's say that we have a sample triangulation, point here. So let's say we're going to go to, let's say we cited to an unknown feature. Mailbox, fire hydrant, whatever it is, light pole. It's not any one of our points here. But let's say we went to it from point B, or we cited to that feature, that unknown feature from point B and from point H. So we have two known points to which we just obtained an angle, an azimuth reading from. So let's go ahead and with our triangulation lines over here in our table of contents, let's go up to edit. Now let's go to create. So under that edit menu, create. All right, so we're in triangulation lines. Let's make sure that we have that one selected. We're going to create just a line feature. The first one on the left where it says line, create a line feature. That's what we're interested in. So left click on that. Now let's go to point B. first. And this is an angle. Again, this is just some random numbers here, but I'm going to left click on point B. I'm going to just take my cursor and drag off of that. Doesn't matter. I'm just moving it away from my zoom window. Now with that line just kind of free flowing, let's right click. And then we're going to select direction length or direction distance right here. Then left click. So now what this gives us is, remember for our triangulation lines, or for our triangulation, when we're trying to identify those unknown features, we don't know how far they are. We're not measuring that. We're not pacing that. We're not taping it. We don't care. We're going to use intersection to determine where that is, just from the angle of two or more known features. So here's our direction. We're going to say from B, that feature was 60 degrees for a distance of, we don't really know. The distance that's populated in this box right here is from our current line segment. That's how long that is, at 221 feet. We know it's not going to be that long, but we'll just say 200 to be safe. Then enter. Okay, so there we go. That's 60 degrees. And now I'm going to right click and then select finish or finish sketch here. So we have one line. So that is from B. You imagine like our compass direction, 60 degrees. 60 degrees. We know that our unknown feature is somewhere along that angle. We just don't know how far. Now let's go up to point H. And that'll be 160 degrees. So we know that we're at point H when we sighted to this unknown feature. With my triangulation line still active over here, I'm going to go to point H, left click, drag off of that. Now right click. And again, that's direction distance or direction length. Our angle was 160 degrees that we obtained from our compass. Again, we don't know the distance, but we know it was somewhere in this neighborhood. So we're going to say, just to be safe, we'll say 250 feet. It's a guess, but we want to make sure that we cover beyond where that feature was. I'm going to select enter. And now right click. And finish sketch. Now I'm just going to go up to the top here in my edit window and just say clear. So no features are selected. Okay. Now we can save we'll save our edits here. I'm going to come back to my map tab and just scroll up here so we can see what we're looking at. So obviously this line was longer, but we don't care necessarily. But where these intersect, that is our feature. So just to complete this, Shay, if you're still with us there, maybe you are, maybe you're not there, and it's okay if you're not. But what would you like to give this name of a feature as here?
Anything I want?
Whatever you want. We're going to load that in here right now, and that'll be it. This is the last step.
Oh, you really put me on the spot.
Could be a tree. It could be a shard. It could be a
shard.
pottery shard.
Yeah, let's call it a shard. I like it.
Okay, so let's do that. This Zoom window is driving me nuts here. So we're going to edit our lab points, and we're going to enter in the shard because we want to add another point right over here where these lines intersected so that we can have a nice representation of where that is. So we're going to go up under the edit tab again, and we're going to create a feature in there. So just under create again and lab points, that's the one we're interested in. So click on lab points, and then we'll select, just create a point feature. And again, our snapping should still be on the way it looks up here. Now we're just going to come down here and have that snap right to our nice little location there, right in the dead center. So we added a feature right there. Now, Shay, here we go. We're going to go back into our attribute table for our lab points. If you guys can make it through this lab, this is the most brutal. So that's the good news. We're getting the hardest one out of the way. And our point here, a shard Shay is C-H-A-R-D.
If you're referring to pottery, S-H-A-R-D.
S-H-A-R-D. Okay, I didn't know that. Very cool. Thank you for the edification there on that, Shay.
Well, I could be wrong. I'm just going. I'm just going with.
Whatever works, you bet. So I'm going to close my create features out here and save my edits again. Yes. And then clear all selected items, just so we're not messing around with that. Close my attribute table. And then in the map tab up here, we can explore that and see what we have. And we wanted to add on the paste data on top of that. There we go. So, you can modify or work with these legends a little bit or the labels if you want to, but this would be an example of a triangulated feature, a shard, all of our points, the paste corrected, paste uncorrected. And of course, feel free to modify your symbology, things like that. But this would be one that you could do for the paste. So your map tab here, your first one could be your paste. If you want to do this with the tape, what I would do is definitely not, make sure you catch this, not add your tape goodies to your paste version. It's going to get too muddy. It won't make a whole lot of sense. So what I would do is go up under insert on the upper menu here, add a new map. So this will bring you to a kind of a clean map, to which case then I would follow just what we did before. Remove your map, set up your scale, and then I would enter your tape and your tape corrected. Again, you're using the same angle. The only thing that's going to differ is your distance for that. And then in the end of your tape, you'll be able to compare your tape to your paste and look at how that unfolds. However many graphics you want to create, it's up to you. I don't think you need to add triangulation lines to both of them, to both your paste and tape, unless you want to. It's up to you. Be creative and have some fun. So that's kind of a minimum to get you started. You can trailblaze beyond this and have a little fun with it as you desire. But that's enough to get you going, to have a little bit of fun. And again, what we're analyzing is that gap distance. And if you do check out the tape version, you could do a side-by-side like we showed you in that sample, in the sample lab right up. You do a side-by-side comparison and talk about that. So it's kind of fun, something cool to look at, something cool to see. So there we have it. Any questions about anything? I mean, that kind of takes us to the end of our demonstration here. Okay, what I'll also try to do is to go back in and edit this out and save this as a separate recording, or I might just go back in and make a new clean recording of this that we can post as well. But at least for now, for class, we have that available, and that's great. So coming back over to the agenda, this is all again posted in Canvas. What are you looking for, or what are we doing for an end product? A handful of graphics, just kind of talking about the experience, what it was that you found, and highlighting your error. We didn't really talk about that a whole lot up here for an agenda item and like IoT stuff, but I don't think it takes a super scientist to think about error and where it could have come into play. Definitely equipment, weather conditions, terrain features, all those are great things to talk about and to frankly inquire about. And also at the end of your lab write-up, towards the end here, kind of following suit with what's listed in the agenda and whatnot, but a general outline, intro, what did you do, descriptively talking about your findings, what you learned from it. Reflection or reflective thought is really, really cool for these. So feel free to drop that in. And then, I don't know, how long should these be? It depends on your graphics. 5 to 8, 9, 10 pages sometimes, but most of them are graphics. But have fun with this. Be creative. Don't be afraid to fail. That's the name of the game for what we're doing here. So any last questions about anything? I think we have everything pretty well covered. If anybody wants to use class data from years prior, I have out here, basically I have the data out here. So we just grab the data, follow our lab demo that we just went through. That's what you need to do. Okay. Well, it's great to see everybody, and go out there, keep looking for Shay, your pottery shards, and all of our unknown features that are there. Thank you, everybody, for hanging on. Your troopers, Jenny, Meg, Alex, Michael, Steve, Pear, Shay, Jerry. Good to see you, Ian, Annika, other folks that had to jump off there too. So I missed you all, and hope to see you again soon here. We'll see if we can get maybe some office hours, or help session like things, basically what it is there. If we can do that. Well, let me know how you're doing, and I may post a global. I know we have one up under the very top of the canvas where it says like ask an instructor type thing or whatever. But I may try to create a global one where people have, if you have a question about something, just to drop in there about a particular lab, and then we can sort of add separate threads to that or comment on a thread. It's kind of like a good community problem solving thing, such that somebody had a question, Jenny might be able to respond to it. Like, what's the difference between a feet and US foot? John doesn't know, but hey, Jenny does, so that's perfect. Let's put that in there. So I'll try to get that up and keep that at the top of our Canvas page. We can use that as a group way to solve problems together. Or email in works too, but odds are if you have a question, somebody else does too, especially for this lab. Michael, you okay? Good. Okay, Jenny, anybody questions? Okay, well, it's great to see you all. Thanks for hanging with me tonight. Have a great rest of the week.
Have a great night.
All right, we'll see you later.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, everybody.
Good seeing you, John. See ya.
Good to see you too.